Very much like. They are all the same old body shape, although they are far apart. But Fujitora can still feel a huge power hidden in Netero's body. This power is usually not obvious. Once it erupts, it must be earth-shattering and shocking. Are you sure you did it with this elder? Fujitora gave Roy a sideways look. Why couldn't he believe it? With Roy's current level, he was not injured. I don't know if he was lucky or if the elder kept his hands. The teacher doesn't believe it. I believe it. Fujitora watched Netero walk towards Menchi and said quietly, he released the water. If he is serious, maybe the old man will not see you. The general's eyesight is still accurate. It took so many methods to break Netero's defense. It is conceivable that if the old man makes a real move, he only needs to use Zero style. Roy thinks he may not be able to work. After all, this is the old man's special skill. He almost killed the Ant King with one palm. If it wasn't because of his age, the Ant King would definitely not be as simple as breaking off a limb. Maybe. Roy shrugged indifferently. He didn't come here with the purpose of killing Netero. Seeing the gap between himself and the top powerhouse, harvesting experience points is the most important meaning of this battle where. However, it is good to be alive. You are still young, but that elder is already old. You still have a lot of time to catch up with him. Greater than Lao Wei believes that you will surpass him in 10 days. Read the tiger's heartwarming, 20s and 40s, comfort, Roy said. That being the case, before that. Then set a small goal first. Let's surpass the teacher first. Roy is in a good mood, looking at Fujitora with a smile. Fujitora. Sinister, I haven't learned all my skills yet, but I'm thinking of deceiving my master and destroying my ancestors. Haha. Good. Fujitora looked deeply at Roy and said, I said I will always wait for you. Roy took a breath. So. Why haven't you dissipated, sir? Please hurry up, I'm waiting to receive your power. Roy gritted his molars, ready to endure the pain caused by the all-round improvement of attributes. His grinning face was reflected in Fujitora's eyes, and he really wanted to use the meteorite skyfall directly destroy him. That will disappoint you. Fujitora sneered, and Shiren said. I found out that with the improvement of your strength, I seem to be able to stay in this world for a longer time. Eh? Roy tilted his head and looked at Fujitora in disbelief. How long can you stay? Mada had never heard of the function of the panel. The panel popped up in time to add an explanation. The inheritance template does have this. As the inheritance progresses faster, in order for the host to better receive the power and experience of the template character, the stay time of the template character in this world is extended. Please let the host know. Remarks. This time the template character, Fujitora Yishao, stays for 48 hours. It's been 2 days. No wonder. This means to give personal guidance, so that I can grasp the other party's strength and experience faster. Roy suddenly realized, and then frowned when Fujitora saw. The blind general raised his eyebrows slightly. Why, old man is not welcome. That's not true. Roy was blind to blind, solemnly looked at Fujitora and said, Teacher, please declare in advance. I don't include food or lodging, guide fees and pocket money. Everything is at your own expense. I hope you understand. Fujitora. I understand what a stick, you might as well change your surname to Grandit instead of Zoldyck. So, let's beat this traitor to death. Fujitora is such a gentle person on weekdays, today he couldn't help showing cross veins on his forehead. He sneered and said, Don't worry, I was beaten to death, crushed and fed to the dog for a projection of my consciousness. And no one will feel bad. So, the old man knows it well, and won't trouble you, Mr. Roy. It's a shame to say that, right? Roy smiled, and said seriously. Welcome the teacher to come to the examination room to give guidance. Wait. Examination room. That's right. Roy glanced at Netero who was walking towards Menchi, and healed up. This level has not been passed yet. Interesting. Fujitora hasn't experienced exams for a long time. I remember the last time when I was studying. As for the Navy recruitment exam. Sorry, Fujitora is not good enough. I'm an admiral, was begged to join the Navy. With a gentle smile on the corner of Fujitora's mouth, he stepped up to follow Roy, passing Netero's body like a ghost. It was as if a dark wind had poured into the body. Netero's expression froze, he suddenly felt cold, and immediately noticed something was wrong. He stopped and looked behind him vigilantly. Except for Roy smiling and nodding at him, there was nothing there. Really strange. Could it be that the old man is thinking too much, or is it that the bad old man Maha is still peeking? Netero raised his eyebrows and glanced at the clock hanging at the door of the warehouse. There was a faint arc of electronic light flashing on the watch movement, and he clearly patted his face on Maha's. What are you looking at? Why don't you hurry up and transfer the money to my grandson? Maha glared at Netero in the picture. and said to the bean-faced man lying on the ground with his dead body on the ground without looking back. "Don't pretend to be dead, get up and do it live." The bean-faced man lay still on his stomach and made up his mind. If the old man doesn't leave, he can't afford it. It's a pity that his wishful thinking failed. Maha raised one foot and lightly stomped on the floor. With a sound of boom, the whole office seemed to tremble, and the Do-Mian man was bounced off the ground. "Oyo, what is the old man doing now?" Do-Mian was in pain, grabbed the sofa and stood up reluctantly, took out his mobile phone tremblingly, and said with a flattering smile, "Don't be angry, I will turn too." "Well, that's what makes sense." Maha retracted his feet and lay down satisfied. Before going to bed, he glanced at the TV again, and a pair of blind eyes, lingering, appeared on the screen again. It seems to be saying, "Old man, 10 billion is not enough." Maha's eyelids twitched violently. He knew that the camera might be the cause, but he still wiped the cold sweat off his forehead in a guilty conscience, tossed and turned, and imitated Do-Mian to find out his elderly phone and gave it to Jeno. Telephone. At that time, it was a luxurious manner, going out on a mission. Jeno, who took off a heart with his bare hands, stood in the pool of blood expressionlessly. Before he had time to clean his hands, he heard the phone in his pocket rang. "Silva, you come to pick it up." Still holding a heart in his hand, Jia Nuo was worried that the blood would burst out and dirty the phone, so Tien Jian asked Silva to pick it up for him. "Yes, father." Silva clenched his hands and strangled the last guard, took out the mobile phone from Geno's pocket, glanced at it, and winked at Jeno. "It's the call from Grandpa." "What Grandpa? I can't hear this word now." Jeno suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, but he had to answer it, so he simply waved his hand and signaled Silva to press the connect button. "Hey, Mrs. Grandpa, it's me, Silva." "Where's your dad?" Silva glanced at Jeno, and Jeno raised his index finger to his lips and gave Silva a wink. "Shish, just say I'm inconvenient." "What's inconvenient for you?" "The third leg is inconvenient, right? Do you want me to break it for you, old man?" Maha's sullen voice came from the phone. "Hurry up and get over here, answer the phone. I have neglected my precious grandson for so many years, and in the end I let an old man who was half buried in the Lois wipe your ass to wipe your ass. Do you still have a conscience?" "Ahem, I didn't say no." Jeno leaned towards the phone with a wry smile and said, "Grandpa, what's the matter this time?" "What else can I do? I'm short of money. Transfer over 20 billion, I need it urgently." "Huh. Didn't I transfer 20 billion to you just now?" Jeno was stunned. "Grandpa, why do you need to spend so much money?" Although 20 billion is not a big amount for the Zoldyck family, but the old man, who has never spent more than 100 million on eating and drinking, will need 40 billion in a few days. "It's too weird. What am I doing?" "I'm wiping the whole family's ass." Maha's angry voice came from the phone, and he said uncompromisingly, "I want to see the money in half an hour, that's all." Beep. The phone hung up. Jeno and Silva, staring blankly at the phone in a daze. "I don't know why. What do you mean by wiping the whole family's ass?" "The Zoldyck family has never owed anything to anyone, and they have never asked for anything. There is no such thing as wiping their ass." "Wait, something is wrong." Jeno and Silva looked at each other, suddenly thought of something. A pair of blind teenagers twirled and broke into the minds of the two, making them fall into a strange silence. After a while, Silva broke the silence first. "Ill fans said that Roy also ran to participate in the Hunter test and injured him. So, could it be that he got into trouble in the test, and the Youth League Committee managed it in order to appease the anger of the Hunter Association?" "There is this possibility." Jeno frowned. "The old man can come forward to help him settle the matter. Thinking about it, the disaster is not small. You call and ask the fans of Illinois to find out what happened. He is on the scene and knows for sure." Silva nodded and made a phone call directly to Ill fans. Ill fans, who had just witnessed a hearty battle, looked at Roy with complicated eyes. Before recovering from the match just now, when they heard the phone ringing, their slightly stiff body trembled, and turned their backs, walking to a remote corner. "I took off the 2 nails stuck on the cheekbones." After that, he moved his mouth and connected the phone. "Hello, Dad." Silva's majestic voice came from the phone. "Did your brother get into trouble?" "Younger brother." Elmi took a look at Kahlua. The white-haired and stinky younger brother hid in the crowd, hiding himself in the crowd to prevent Roy from seeing him. He didn't look like a master who caused trouble, but rather a counselor. The very cute kitty. "Well, if you're talking about Roy, Dad, I think it would be a disaster if you beat the examiner and then the president of the Hunter Association." "Are you talking nonsense, or are our fathers old, hard of hearing, and misheard? Beating the examiner is fine, but beating the president of the Hunter Association? He is the strongest human being. Who dares? Who deserves to fight with him? Jano and Silva looked at each other. No one spoke for a long time. Fans seemed to have expected this kind of reaction from Silva, just about to add a few words, but heard a creepy voice coming from behind him. Ho 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 ho. Who are you calling? Netero, with his hands behind his back, came behind Yermi at some point, looked at him with a smile, and said in his heart. The old man said, why is it so sinister, and you are the one who co-authored it. Is the kid doing something bad? As soon as Fujitora wore it, Netero felt that something was wrong at that time, and a strong man like him feels extremely strong, and he will not feel cold or uncomfortable for no reason. So, Netero has been paying attention to the surroundings, looking for something to let him know. The reason why I feel uncomfortable. But I didn't expect to search around, but it made Ilmer and Fujitora take the blame. Silva's phone number. At this time, Roy walked over with Fujitora, glanced at the phone in Yermi's hand with a blank expression, and said, tell him, wait for me to go home. I want to take back everything that is rightfully mine. Silva. You owe him money. Jeno stared at Silva's voice on the other end of the phone, so familiar that Jeno would never forget it. It must be Roy. But shouldn't the point be Netero? Dad, why are you looking at me like that? Silva bit the bullet and said, it's a debt. You. Jeno said with a sullen face. Don't worry about how much you owe, pay him back as soon as possible. Still, can I borrow my son's money? Besides, I didn't take the kid's money, I just persuaded him to go home, but he didn't listen. Silva stiffened his neck and said, I'm his father. There is no reason to pay back. Oh, Jeno patted Silva's shoulder, you can wish for luck. He turned around and walked with his hands behind his back. He's not stupid, he also heard Netero's voice just now, which means, what Ilfan said is probably true. That kid has already developed ahead of time, and he has grown abnormally to the point where he can fight Netero. It is conceivable that when he comes home. Tisk. My old man, it's better not to go home in the near future. Silva. Hey, father, do you want the reward for this poisoning? Jeno sneered. I'll leave it to you to buy the coffin. In a flash, he disappeared from Silva's eyes. Silva. With a sound of paw, I accidentally pinched the phone and exploded. I was shocked. Yermi was speechless, spread his hands, looked innocently at Netero, then at Roy. He hung up the phone. Netero laughed twice, glanced at Roy, and said leisurely, forget it if you hang up. The old man wanted to chat with Jeno. It seems unnecessary now. The president of the conference stroked his beard and turned to walk towards the warehouse. The moment he turned his back, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared. Number. It's not about Il's fans. That look at me hasn't disappeared yet. This elder has such a keen intuition. He seems to have noticed me. Fujitora's eyebrows were also fixed, watching Netero walk towards Menchi, and whispered to Roy. Isn't it okay if you don't go to see him? Roy gave Fujitora an angry look. Actually, you don't need to talk to me so quietly, and others can't hear you. Fujitora nodded. That's true. He is nothing more than a phantom of will. It is impossible to be seen at all. The reason why Netero was able to notice the strangeness was rather to find that the eyes were watching him, that's all. Let's go, teacher, I'll treat you to boiled eggs later. Roy smiled and winked at Fujitora, followed by Netero with a stare. Fujitora smiled. You still have a conscience. Then I realized something was wrong. I can get a fart with a will projection. The kid really belongs to Grandit, it's really hateful. Haha. The joyous laughter came over. Fujitora saw the cheerful figure of the young man, shook his head and laughed, his figure fluttered, and followed closely beside Roy. Hello, Teacher Tiano. Dao-sensei, you are so cool. After the aftermath receded, order returned. Roy returned to the candidate group, and was immediately surrounded by Gon, Kurapika, Leorio and a lot of fans. It's rare to enjoy some heroic treatment. Hey, this kid is quite popular. Fujitora noticed this scene. Roy's popularity somewhat surprised him. Hee. Hello. You are also good. It's just so. Damn. Hit a Netero to make trouble. That's not. In my eyes, you are more powerful than the pirate King Roger. That's right, Mr. Tianwei is being modest. Compared to you, any admiral is nothing more than a piece of shit. Look at the name. Dog, rooster, monkey. It's not even a human being. How can it be compared with Mr. Tianwei? Ahem. The old man seems to have heard something extraordinary. Roy, can you explain it to the old man? What kind of pirate king? What Roger? What kind of general? Are you sure you didn't travel to the wrong world? Could it be that this is still the world of One Piece? The wetland under our feet is just an unknown island somewhere on the Great Route? Fujitora was confused, looked at Roy faintly. Roy. Sensen rubbed the bridge of his nose, coughed dryly, and said to Fujitora through consciousness, "It's actually nothing. I just drew the world you live in and what happened in the world, teacher, into cartoons, and spread it." Huh. Fujitora stared at Roy dumbfounded. Is this the point? No. How do you know the world where the old man is, who is there, what happened? This is more complicated. Roy looked at Fujitora mysteriously, and whispered in his ear. Tell the teacher a secret quietly. In fact, I ate a fruit of unpredictable profit. If you don't go out, you can do everything in the world. Shit. According to what you said, if this is not the great root, where would you get the devil fruit to eat? Fujitora rarely blew his beard and stared, and snorted coldly. It's so powerful, you might as well count it for the old man. I'd like to see if your kid is right. Hey, since the teacher is so persistent, I will reluctantly count on the teacher for the students. Teacher, please stretch out your hand and let me see. Fujitora stretched out his left hand suspiciously. Roy looked intently, frowned, and shook his head. Teacher, just looking at your palmistry, you have lived a miserable life. Fujitora raised his eyebrows. How do you say? Roy put on a straight face, and said solemnly, you lost your father when you were young, your friends when you were young, your wife when you were middle-aged, your son when you were old, and finally died of depression. What a pity. Put NMD shit on. You will wait. When did this old man marry a wife and have a child? Fujitora was numb, and stared at Roy angrily, and Faye rested on the stick knife. Roy looked at him in surprise and said, don't you know? Your wife, that is, my teacher's wife, is called Charlotte Lingling. Fujitora. Clang, pulling out the knife, he roared angrily, Pan 2 will die. Hey, how can you cut people while talking, teacher, you can't afford it. Did you tell me to tell you? Roy put his hands in his pockets, watching narrowly as the stick knife passed through his body. Fujitora was almost stunned by that look of needing a beating. Let's go. You kid is also a secret, the old man will wait for the day when you tell the truth. Fujitora put away his stick knife, and gave Roy a fierce glare. He looks like a phantom now, and there is really nothing he can do about this brat. That's right. Roy patted Fujitora's shoulder, raised his hand, and passed through Fujitora's body, and accidentally scratched Fujitora's with his fingertips. Fujitora. Roy. Coughed twice in embarrassment. Ahem, I'm going to take the exam. Then I smeared the soles of my feet with oil and walked away in a hurry. Hey, uncle, why are you talking to yourself? Strange. Gon scratched his head, swung the fishing rod on his shoulder, and chased after Roy. Wait for me. This idiot, he can't do without me. Leorio hugged his briefcase and followed closely behind. On the side, Kurapika glanced at Kahlua. Don't worry, Mr. Tiano doesn't seem to want to pursue you any further. That's because you don't know him. Kahlua curled his lips and didn't bother to talk to Kurapika. The guy with that little kid who always hurts his heart must not be a good person. Just put down the skateboard and kickstep on, walk. Karapi watched him hide away, and there seemed to be a familiar guy beside him, who seemed to be called Tonpa, shook his head, chased Leorio and Gon, followed behind Roy, and came to Menki's beside. At this time, the dignified one-star gourmet hunter, no longer the prestige of the past, lowered his head, being reprimanded by Netero. Little Menchi, it's not a good thing to be too stubborn. The old man appreciates your attitude of pursuing delicious food, but your part in the second half of the second test. I want to see if they have the courage to challenge the unknown. Is it a bit too much? Have you passed it? In fact, my purpose is to focus on both internal and external tests. Shen-Chi differentiated for herself in a low voice. That's why I thought of making a very difficult dish to compete. How dare the girl talk back? Netero glared at her and said, what did you mean? Men-Chi raised her head to meet Netero's Furui Wubo's eyes, and took a breath. Then she heard Netero say quietly, in the end, the conclusion you got is. Everyone's challenge ability is problematic, so it is judged that all of them are unqualified. Is that right? Cold sweat broke out on Men-Chi's forehead, and she squeaked. In the end, she was defeated by Netero's harsh words. I had to announce that the test results just now were invalid. Yeah. Excited shouts resounded. Candidates have been suffering from Menchi for a long time. Seeing her bow her head, it is more refreshing than looking up and killing a bottle of ice water in the dog days. Hee. I didn't expect this little girl to be quite capable, but she's not very popular. Fujitora was eating melons, walked up to Roy, and made a rare comment. Roy nodded in agreement. It's true that you have big breasts and big temperament. You better say it's really fierce. Fujitora's hand holding the stick knife tightened, and it was itchy again. Since that's the case, then it's fine. As long as you lower your head, it's easy to handle. I'm afraid that this girl will not change her nature, and won't let go. Netero breathed a sigh of relief, raised a finger, looked at Men-Chi seriously and said, "Let's conduct another cooking test. I hope you can be fair and selfless this time. More importantly, the new questions must be added to the candidates' tests by you, as an examiner, in a demonstrative way. What do you think of this proposal?" President, Arigato. Men-Chi seemed to realize her mistake, and bowed deeply to Netero. The girl bent down. Fujitora raised her eyebrows and said, "Isn't there something wrong? Ditch?" Roy pulled his face and solemnly warned Fujitora, "Teacher, remember, you are a man with a wife, so don't watch what you shouldn't." Fujitora. "Ha ha ha, you're just bullying the old man and I'm not here anymore. Otherwise, I'll let you eat a meteorite sooner or later, villain." The hand of Fujitora holding the stick knife has veins popping out, but unfortunately no one except Roy can notice him. "Ho ho ho ho, I knew you were an honest and good boy." Netero helped Men-Chi up with his own hands, and said happily, "Then, the examiner, please come up with the questions." Men-Chi took a deep breath, thought for a while, came up with an idea, and said loudly, "This time, the topic of the retest is, boiled eggs." Yaxi. This time the topic is simple. Great. Finally it's a little more normal. That shit nigiri sushi almost gave me a hard time. A group of examinees including Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, Hanzo, and Toto breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. But they didn't know that an old blind man stared at the young blind man in a place they couldn't see. Looking at him in disbelief, he said, "Roy, you really ate the fruit of unborn prophet, right? Boiled eggs?" Fujitora doesn't think Roy just said, "Please eat boiled eggs," just casually. However, this made him right. Hiss, has the old man really married that old hag, Charlotte Lingling? The general was shaken for a moment, and began to doubt his life. Especially when Roy looked at him with a half smile and said, "Guess." Fujitora's eyelids twitched, his Dao heart was about to collapse. "Humph, I don't guess. Boiled eggs are more for the old man, my wife Lingling is just a fool." "Teacher, you are awesome." Roy gave Fujitora a thumbs up, admiring the whole body, followed by a group of candidates, followed by Menki and Netero, and boarded the airship. Destination: the habitat of grape spiders, Toad Tiger Mountain. Hum. The propeller smashed the air and hummed. Not long after, the flying boat carried the examinees to the sky above a river valley. The hatch opened, and Netero glanced at Roy. "Boy, let's go." "Go. Where are you going? The president doesn't mean to jump off, does he?" The scene of Netero jumping from a height of 100 meters just now is still vivid in my memory. Roy stands tall in the sky, and his heroic figure like a demon god is still washing away the hearts of everyone. All the candidates looked at the two with envy. Roy nodded at Netero, pointed his toes, and got out of the cabin first, stepping on the moon steps, and was already meters away in the blink of an eye. "This trick is really cool, I really want to learn it." Gon looked at Roy with sparkling eyes, and in the blink of an eye, Netero put his hands behind his back, dodged, stepped on the air, and chased him out. "It will definitely cost money to learn." Leorio bit his nails, thinking in his heart who wouldn't be envious. Just because of their friendship with Roy, it must not be free, right? "Please remove it, right?" Kurapika glanced at Kahlua beside him. "He doesn't even spare his own brother, do you expect him to take extra care of us?" Kurapika disagrees. He still remembers the words Roy once said to him by the stream. To get his care, you must first be strong enough to stand in front of him. At this time, looking at the whole boatload of people, it doesn't count if you exclude a few examiners, so Hisoka, a pervert, may be qualified to stand in front of Mr. Tianwei, but maybe. "Oh ho ho ho, my favorite apple, don't let me throw it in the trash by myself." The familiar perverted laughter is creepy. Just when everyone is secretly scolding this pervert for going crazy. Hisoka opened his arms and jumped out of the flying boat. The so-called leap of faith is nothing more than that. Don't you young people in this world take unusual paths? Fujitora followed Roy, glanced at Hisoka. Dressed like a clown, the corners of his mouth were grinning in a deep versus shape. Weird, and the infiltrator is someone I know from the old man who is very good at pretending to be like a guy. Red-nosed Bucky? Roy pouted, he's more or less normal. But this one in your eyes is a real pervert. Oh? Fujitora was interested, but unfortunately Roy said more lazily, and his pace slowed down, giving Netero a chance to walk side by side. Ho 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 ho, Roy, the moonwalk you invented is really good. It's not good for long-distance trekking, but for short-distance travel, I'm afraid it can't be compared with flying boats. Fujitora. He glared at Roy, and said with a half-smile, ho ho ho, when did you invent the moon step? Why doesn't the old man know? Don't worry about such details, Roy avoids the important and ignores the meaningful blind eyes of Fujitora, and said to Netero expressionlessly, "Old man, if you brag, you can avoid it. If you have anything to say, just say it directly." Roy will not believe that Netero will be so kind and invite him to take a walk. "Well, it's about the Dark Continent. I wonder if you're interested." Netero looked at Roy meaningfully. Roy frowned, and looked at Netero calmly. The president of the conference laughed and said, "You will definitely go in the future." "How can you be so sure?" Roy raised an eyebrow. "Intuition." Smiling, Netero looked at Roy seriously and said, "The old man has already promised your great-grandpa that after you break the limit 3 times, I will give you the notes left by Jaeger back then. I believe you will be interested." "Jaeger Zoldyck? Master, you don't have to beat around the bush here." Roy's pale, blind eyes stared at Netero and said, "You just tell me. What did you see on the Dark Continent back then?" Roy knows very well that in the original book, it is the Dark Continent that Netero accompanied Jaeger to explore. It's just a twist of fate. One came back and became the president of the association admired by thousands of people. One brought the family a disaster happened, and finally died tragically at home. If you say Netero doesn't know something, you won't believe it if you kill Roy. People. Netero didn't seem to hide Roy's meaning at all, and said amazingly, "The old man saw people on the Dark Continent. One hit and Jaeger and I were seriously injured." "A person? A blow?" Roy opened his mouth slightly, his heart fluttering, and he fell into a long silence. As far as he knows, whether it is Gon's ancestors, the Dong Fulishi who set foot on the Dark Continent 300 years ago and left behind a wonderful book, Journey to the New World, or the monster guarding the gate of the Dark Continent. I have never heard of the word, human, on the Dark Continent from their mouths. What is mentioned more is the dangerous monsters and the disasters that make people's scalp tingle just by hearing the name. For example, Education Beast, Pap. For example, the Hellbell of the Two-Tailed Snake, for example, the immortal disease Zorba Eye Disease. For example, the plant weapon Gold and Silver Ingots. For example, the gas life form Eye. So, what the hell is a person? If what Netero said is true, how did the person who injured him, or a group of people, survive on the Dark Continent where monsters and disasters are rampant? With their strength and wisdom, could it be can't you find out that there is still a human world in Lake Mobius? Or to put it another way, they humans, whether it's V5, the Republic of Batorchia, or even the Kajin Empire, are just the group of people on the Dark Continent, pigs raised in captivity? At this moment, thoughts grew wildly in Roy's mind like weeds. The blind man felt cold all over his body, and couldn't help shivering. When he bumped into Netero's black and white pupils, he saw this survivor who was known to have explored the Dark Continent and returned alive, and said faintly, "It's also possible the old man made a mistake in expressing. That's not a person, but a god, what a strange yet familiar word." An understatement was said by Netero, but unexpectedly it was as heavy as a mountain. The old man seemed to be lost in memory, he closed his mouth and didn't want to say more. He silently looked at Roy. The boy's face changed, and after a while, he regained his composure, and said lightly to Netero, "If it's true, I hope it's fake, if it's fake, I hope it's true. There must be a road before the car reaches the mountain. Old man, it's useless for you to tell me this now." Roy looked directly into Netero's eyes, took a deep breath and said, "Since there are really gods in this world, I don't think the god realm would mind adding me, Roy. Young people have their own lofty ambitions, and they will no longer flow forever. There is no Yellow River here, but there is Mobius Lake, which is longer and wider than the Yellow River." The exhaustion around him dissipated, and a vague breath came out from Roy's body. That was the King's Foundation, responding to Roy's call for determination, jumped out, and radiated towards the surrounding area. Overlord color domineering. The chi has broken the limit, and this kid's chi seems to be different. Netero felt this chi, and looked at it for a moment, remembering that he had seen Roy show his hand on TV, and he was shocked with one blow. "I fainted all the facial apes, and I was very impressed by this. But now I feel it on the ground." Netero has discovered the clues. Roy's chi has a taste of Wang King. He couldn't help but feel palpitations. "I can't help but surrender. This is an intuitive feeling that Kajin's twice-cooked meat lady can't bring him. It's really a rare thing, when I grow up. It's domineering. As a local native, Netero may not know what this chi is. But for the Admiral of the Navy, Fujitora, who has been in the top ranks of the Navy all year round, and wanders among the emperors of the sea from time to time, is there anyone who knows better than him what the essence of this chi is? You boy. The blind general lost his composure in a rare way. He flicked the cloak of justice on his back, and in a blink of an eye, he had already touched Roy's body. He was about to grab his wrist and check it out, but he forgot that he is now a projection of will. The hand went straight through Roy's body. Don't bother, teacher. Roy saw through Fujitora's thoughts at a glance, and said lightly, as you can see, I have awakened the domineering look. Hoo ho ho ho, it's really amazing. Fujitora was confirmed, holding a stick knife, and quietly looking at Roy. As the pair of blind eyes opened and closed, they bloomed with unprecedented brilliance. Originally, the purpose of this old man's coming here is to teach you the advanced use of armed colors, Liu Ying. Now it seems that Liu Ying is no longer good enough for you, it's better than Liu Chan. A well-known education enthusiast, Mr. Kaido, once said bluntly, domineering is everything. And domineering, as an existence that may not be able to awaken even one case among millions of people, is the king of domineering, the standard equipment for top powerhouses. I don't know, Shanks, the 4 emperors, cut Kid to pieces with a sword, Shenfu, and the 70-year-old veteran, with a fist bone, destroyed the hive. Knowing how to bully you can become a real king. Fujitora admits that he is sore. The learning method of dominant bullying, that he learned from Carp with great difficulty, I didn't expect that I can't use it, but it's cheap this student from a different world who lost me. Sure enough, the blue outgrew the blue, and in the end he was better than the blue. Don't worry, teacher, now is not the time to learn tyranny. Roy was also very surprised that Fujitora would have the tyrannical study method. While excited, he did not forget that it was the exam period, so he turned to Netero and said, Old man, the words have already been told to you. I'm going to the Dark Continent, and I want Jaeger's notes too. I'm done talking here, you will succeed. Ho 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 ho, you can't be considered a provocative general. Netero looked at Roy with piercing eyes and said, My child, I am old, and there is nothing in this world that I can fall in love with. Other old men don't dare to say, when one day you decide to leave, just tell this old man will spread my last residual heat on that unknown land. Having been the president for a lifetime, Netero is also tired, enough is enough, it's time to pay back the punch of the past. An old man, his ambition is 1,000 miles away. It's a pity, old man, I'm afraid you won't be able to wait until that day. Roy couldn't bear to hit Netero and said, From now on, it will be the world of young people. On the new ship to the Dark Continent, there is no place for you. What do you mean? Why does this kid talk as annoyingly as some bad old man? Sure enough, the upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. Humph. Wait until when you can defeat the old man, then talk about that big talk. Netero gave Roy a noncommittal look, and floated to stand with him on the edge of the river valley. At that time, the flying boat also landed, and a group of examinees and 3 examiners, Menchi, Buhara, and Sachi, came out one after another. Among them, there is only one figure missing. It is that strange man, Zhao Talaku. It's not dead yet. Ilmi walked out from behind the crowd, found Hisoka, watched him limping out of a deep pit, clicked his tongue, really embarrassing enough. Why don't you read? Il fans know very well that Hisoka can land in 100 ways as long as he thinks about it, but he chooses to use the most stupid and direct, physical landing method. It's not like what he can do as a conjurer. Enhancer is almost the same. Ho ho ho. Hisoka bumped into Ilmi's dead fisheyes head on, and Hisoka turned over and sat on the ground, with one arm propped on the ground, the eyes bent into crescent moons, looking greedily over there. Netero and Roy licked their lips and said, I just don't want to be weaker than my apple. Not reconciled to 3. Yes, I am not reconciled. Il was dazed. His pair of dead fisheyes without any emotion, looked Hisoka up and down. It was like looking at a stranger. It made him feel a little strange. Fruit growers raise fruit. After raising it, do you find that you can't even chew on the peel? Even the apple has to be gnawed by the fruit farmer in turn. The farmer and the snake is a perverted version. This is. Be grateful to me. After you die, I will build you a tomb in the shape of playing cards. Yi or me said with a blank face, nails all over his face, as his lips opened and closed. Make a piercing, crunch, crunch, sound. Oh ho ho ho, you don't like me so much? Hisoka wiped his hair, looked at Yi or me suspiciously, and smiled. It's not that is not optimistic, but that you are unrealistic. Il fans quietly looked at Netero and Roy, who stood side by side with Netero. His younger brother had just grown up, abnormally developed, and has become a towering tree. As a brother, he has to look up. If you want to challenge them, let's wait until you pass the 10 levels of Krollo first. Oh ho ho ho. Hisoka covered his face, suppressed his laughter, looked at Ilmi through his fingers and said, I suddenly regretted coming to participate in this hunter test. Compare those two, Krollo, he's just a rotten apple. It's tasteless to eat, it's a pity. Then do you still want to fight him? Yi or me asked. I still have to fight. Hisoka stood up, walked towards the crowd and said, just treat him as an appetizer before dinner, ho ho ho. An appetizer? As the head of an A-level criminal group, the other party is not easy to imagine. Watch out for the boat capsized in the gutter. ILMI watched Hisoka drift away with a blank expression, and raised his heels to go up. At this time, all the people have come out of the flying boat, gathered at the edge of the river valley and looked down. The bottom of the deep river valley cannot be seen at a glance. Someone tried to throw a stone down, but it took a long time to wait for the response. So, where are the eggs of boiled eggs? I won't let Lao Su dig out his own eggs to cook them. Everyone looked at Menchi and Menchi grunted, took off his pants, only wearing a pair of leggings, and jumped into the river valley in front of Toto and all the examinees. Nah, let me demonstrate to you first. You see. With that said, the person sighed and disappeared from everyone's eyes. Worry, is she committing suicide in fear of crime? Don't need to be so staunch. God damn committing suicide. We are all dead, and that woman won't commit suicide. Open your dog eyes and take a good look. There must be another mystery in the valley. Maybe the egg is in it. Ho 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 ho. There are a few discerning people. Netero put his hands behind his back and faced the candidates. Shiren explained. There are grape spiders inhabiting the Toad Tiger Mountain, and she jumped down to pick the eggs of grape spiders. Maid. The egg is really down there. It's so deep, you can't fall to your death if you jump down. The noise is loud. Except Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, Hanzo, Burns, Chingli and others who are more confident in their own strength except for the guy. The other candidates undoubtedly swallowed a mouthful of saliva, their legs trembling. Courage should be tested in this test. Fujitora held a stick and knife in his hand, looked up and looked at the reactions of all living beings, and said to Roy with a smile. Picking eggs in the abyss is a good test question. But compared to the dark continent where you and that elder are in flames. This exam question is not worth mentioning. No way, the process still has to go. Roy shrugged, flicked his fingers, and 5 armed lust threads came out from his fingertips, spreading along the deep river valley. Huh. Fujitora looked at these thought lines in surprise. He had never seen such a usage of armed color domineering before. He touched it with a novel hand, and passed directly under the thought line. But I forgot that I am now a will projection. But only from the shape of the breath. Fujitora judged. This is not similar to Ming's string fruit ability. On the contrary, it is like the ability to let go of anger. But does the domineering color of the armed color show off? Fujitora doesn't remember this, that it's not unusual for the domineering color to show off. 0. How did you do this? Fujitora asked shamelessly. For a while, he didn't know who was the teacher and who was the student. Roy blinked at Fujitora. People are different, teacher. As he spoke, he made a hook with his fingers, and several eggs of grape spiders wrapped in the armed lust thread rushed into everyone's eyes. Anyone want eggs? 100 million eggs, sell again? Pa. I knew it would be like this. Sachi and Buhara looked at Roy speechlessly, and patted their foreheads together. The blind man sees the needles, he is either making money or he is on the way to make money, and there is no one. Tell him to sell it, like this. It is estimated that no one will be eliminated in this exam, so what's the point? Ahem. I forgot to say that it is forbidden to sell or give grape spider eggs to outsiders. Violators will be treated as violating the rules of the examination room and eliminated immediately. Netero old man is fine, and before the candidates exploded, reacted quickly and made a series of remedies. Isn't the old thing looking for faults? Roy was angry, he shook his hand, and threw all the eggs down, keeping only one. The examinees who saw it were heartbroken. 100 million people can't afford it. That's my egg. My egg. Don't blame me. Go find him if you have trouble. With no money to make, Roy was in a bad mood, glanced at Netero, and spread his hands at Fujitora. Teacher, you're gone. Fujitora. Netero. Thank you, old man. Crack, ouch, who threw the egg? I want to murder. Men-Chi climbed up with her egg liquid on her head, furious. How can it be repaired? This is attacking the examiner, right? Whoever hit me, stand up for me. Me. Roy is tall and tall, with a stick and knife in his hand, giving people an illusion that it seems to cover the sun. Menchi. Forget it. Raised his hand to remove the eggshell stuck to his hair, and secretly cursed bad luck. Instead of looking at Roy, he raised the egg in his hand and said to the candidates, this is the ingredient I want, the egg of the grape spider. Grape spiders, in order to prevent their eggs from becoming delicacies for land beasts, hang their eggs one by one in the valley with strong spider silk. All you have to do is jump off, pick an egg, and climb up the cliff. Remind you, the water flow under the valley is very fast, if you fall, you will die or die. Of course, except for some people. Men-Chi secretly complained. Such as the president. such as that nasty guy, Roy Zoldyck. Great. I'm just waiting for this kind of exam. Compared with cooking and other things, I'm really suitable for these adventurous jobs. Some people are afraid. Some people are eager to try. The confident people, headed by Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, Hanzo, etc. jumped off the cliff without hesitation. Toto was left with a straw bag. The others were trembling with trepidation. Even if they gritted their teeth and jumped down, it would be a waste of their lives. So, in other words, the world of Hunter x Hunter is a world of extreme danger and disregard for human life. In a test, when the examiner and even the chairman are present, people will die. From this it can be seen that the general. Sometimes it's a virtue to give up. Netero looked at the examinees who fell to their death in the river valley. Or were washed into the sea by the rapid current with a gloomy look. There is no bodhisattva-like heart. This point is far from the elder whom the old man respects. Fujitora glanced at Netero and said quietly. No need to think about it. Roy also knows who he is talking about. It is true, if Mr. Garp is here, he will definitely not let his fresh lives disappear. But when it comes to being a human being, he is as good as Netero. It's nothing compared to that. Fujitora frowned, turned his head to look at the boy beside him, and waited quietly for his next words. Roy listened to the wind mixed with screams, and said with a sneer, kindness can't save the world. So what if you're a naval hero? Why don't you sit and watch Ace die on top? Not to mention that he is a navy, but he has taught a son who is a revolutionary soldier, and 2 grandsons who are pirates. Hey, it's really ironic. Fujitora. He frowned tightly and fell into a long silence. He didn't even know when the exam would end. It wasn't until the flying boat started again, carrying all the candidates who passed the exam, to the next exam site, that he suddenly came back to his senses, looked deeply at Roy and said, the old man believes that you have eaten the fruit of the unpredictable prophet. They are obviously separated by 2 worlds, and maybe even the time and dimension are different. Roy knows the world of One Piece very well. If it wasn't for the prophet of the future, Fujitora really couldn't find the reason why the other party could know so many things. As for Carp, he sighed and said, Mr. Carp also has his own difficulties. Difficulties? None of my business. Roy looked at Fujitora solemnly and said, Teacher, don't worry about your 3-acre land. The world is far beyond your imagination. If you have the skill to worry about others, why not teach me how to be tyrannical? The propeller smashed the air and made a hum. There is still a distance to the next trap tower. If you don't seize this free time to gain experience, it is a waste of life. The reason for the tiger. Not to mention that the other party only has 48 hours of existence, and now a third of it has passed. Hoo ho ho ho. It's because the old man's style is small. Fujitora was stunned, and looked at the young man's pair of blind eyes similar to his own, shook his head and said with a smile, let's go. One old and one young entered the airship and came straight to the deck. Hula. The violent wind blows head on. Different from the Poseidon and other ships, if you want to gain a foothold on the deck of the flying ship, without outstanding physical fitness and excellent determination to resist the strong wind, if you were blown down for 10 miles, you will die. So few people stood on the deck, except for a certain bald ninja who quietly came out to practice, Hanzo. 1115. 1116. 1117. The bald man who was lying on the deck and sitting with his thumbs up, vaguely heard a series of footsteps, and felt a warning in his heart. He dodged to a wall, poked out half of his face, and sneaked a sneak peek. Accompanied by the sound of footsteps from far to near. The blind man hangs a gourd of wine on his waist, holds a stick knife in his hand, taps, and walks slowly. The pair of blind eyes sweeps towards his direction expressionlessly, and instantly. Hanzo was sweating all over his body. Oops, he must have spotted me. Mada, bad luck. How did you bump into him here? Oh ho ho ho, you seem to be dissatisfied. Why don't we switch? A perverted magician was alone in a corner of the lounge, playing a game of stacking pyramids. He glanced up and found his favorite, Apple, in the room. He was inevitably disappointed. As for, he hugged himself tightly and smiled depressedly. Where did you go? Why did you leave me with this bunch of trash? Or, just let me kill them all. Oh ho ho ho. Hey, this lunatic is sick again. Tompa avoided Hisoka and hid him far away. Was going to fool Kurapika and Leorio into not letting them sleep. A fierce and domineering aura of clinker turned into a gust of wind and swept over, immediately. He felt a blackness before his eyes, and the world was spinning, and with a plop, he passed out on the ground. Roy, the first step in learning domineering is to find out the actuality of your own domineering. Do your best to release your domineering color and try to expand its coverage to the maximum. At the end of the deck, Fujitora and Roy stood against the wind, and the general's cloak with the word, justice, printed on them seemed to be blown up by the wind, fluttering. Opposite him, the young man's black hair was blown upside down by the strong wind. After hearing the teacher's words, he nodded and threw the power in his hand on the deck. A muffled sound of dong sounded like a dull bell, and when the sound waves were rippling, the title, King's Foundation, shone, and with Roy's heart, the domineering arrogance exploded. With him as the center of the circle, the violent wind tore apart and swept away towards the surroundings. Ripples and vibrations. Hanzo was the first to bear the brunt. His expression froze, his 5 fingers clasped the wall, and he said in amazement, "What the hell is this guy Tianwei doing? Is it okay to let go of your momentum and come out to play?" The domineering Hanzo has seen it before, and it looks familiar. Before, in the operation to clear the man-faced ape, Roy did not show his extremely powerful aura, but that was to clear the human face. But what is he doing now? Could it be that he is practicing? This is really strange. Monk Joji Hanzo can't figure it out. He has grown up so big, and he has never seen anyone who specializes in momentum. With the attitude of stealing the teacher, he watched intently as the domineering and fierce domineering arrogance swept past him and swept directly towards the various cabins of the flying ship. In the lounge, after Menchi announced free activities, except for Gon and Kahlua who went out to explore and were caught by Netero to play a game of grabbing the ball, most of the candidates who passed the exam gathered here. Kurapika, Leorio, Babu the snake, Burns the beekeeper, Xing Li the martial artist, Greta the lion hunter. Either lying down, or huddled in a corner to take a nap. I was about to take advantage of this gap period to take a good rest and replenish my strength, but unfortunately I witnessed it. The scene where Uncle Dong falls headlong. Immediately before they could react, the candidates who were weak and congenitally deficient rolled their eyes, and all of them stepped into Tonpa's footsteps, falling to the ground one by one. Patong, patong, all the candidates fell into a coma like dumplings. Kurapika, Leorio and others who can barely maintain their sobriety, you look at me, I look at you, and look at each other. The sleepiness is gone in an instant. Hee. This scene is a little familiar. Kurapika, help me, I can't seem to get up. Leorio, who was half leaning against the wall, was dizzy and tried to catch Kurapika, but unexpectedly his arms were limp. I ran out of energy, just rushed to the air. Fortunately, Kurapika had quick eyesight and quick hands, stretched out a hand to catch him, and prevented him from falling to the ground with his head up and knocking on the back of his head. I advise you to lie down and rest. Kurapika directly acted as Leorio's master, pinning him on the floor of the lounge and forcing him to rest. Leorio's eyelids were open because of frequent fights, and he was not trying to hold on. He followed the steps given by Kurapika and lay down, standing corpse. Before he closed his eyes, he asked Kurapika while he still had a little consciousness, "Trouble you in Tianwei?" The teacher said, "Next time, can you say it in advance? I really don't want to faint like this." What Leorio said broke everyone's heart. Even if you think about it with your ass, you can still know who it is. It's a good thing I'm strong enough, otherwise, maybe I'll be the one lying down. At the same time, this idea appeared in my mind. The corners of Babu and the others twitched, not knowing if it was me lucky or unlucky. You can rest at ease. Kurapika twitched the corners of his mouth, kept silent, and helped Leorio close his eyes. Let Roy warn in advance. He doesn't even have the qualifications to stand in front of the opponent. How can he be the master of the opponent? Not to mention that there is a huge trouble waiting for him. Are waiting watching him, Bob, Burns, Cleanup, Greta. Because a perverted magician didn't fall down either. He seemed ready to move, and couldn't control his killing intent. Ah, Sabarasi. Do you want to play the examiner's game again? Hisoka stretched out a finger and pushed down the pyramid of cards that had been piled up with great difficulty. The corners of the mouth were pulled up obliquely, hooked into a deep versus shape, and the pair of eyes with perverted smiles in the shadows swept across the bodies of Kurapika, Babu, Burns and others. They all slapped shivering. I took out my weapon and stood on guard. Oh ho 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 ho, forget it. You guys are not as good as my one finger of Tianwei. Hisoka stood up slowly, picked up a joke card scattered on the ground, blew it and put it in his mouth, turned and walked out of the lounge. As he walked, his body couldn't stop shaking, and his wanton laughter penetrated the entire lounge. Ah, Tano. My favorite, Dao, what are you doing? I'm really curious. Oh ho ho ho, crazy. Sooner or later, this guy will die at the hands of Mr. Tianwei. You're right. How about we raise money and ask Mr. Tianwei to kill him? Made. Every day is like a psychopath. I'm not surprised to be killed by him one day. Watching Hisoka leave, Babu, Burns, Xing Li, and Greta all heaved a sigh of relief, turned their hands and put their weapons back. At this time, Greta shouted at Kurapika. Hey, Kurapika, You are the closest to Mr. Tiano. Why don't you talk to Mr. Tiano? What did you say? Ask Mr. Tianwei to kill Hisoka. With a faint sneer on the corner of Kurapika's mouth, he looked at Greta and the others, and said mercilessly, Hisoka is right. We're trash, that is. He doesn't care about our life or death. Do you think Teacher Tianwei will take us seriously? Bob, Burns, Ching Li, Greta. What the F**k you said makes sense. It's hard to tell what it's like, but Greta and the others didn't feel humiliated at all. When the gap in strength has reached the point where it is difficult for people to work hard for a lifetime, it seems no big deal to accept their own mediocrity. For example, all the examiners who are sipping fragrant tea leisurely and getting rid of their exhaustion have done a good job. What do you guys think? A luxuriously decorated tea room on the second floor of the flying ship. Men-Chi crossed her legs, drank tea comfortably, and looked at Buhara and Sachi next to her. They didn't have half a point of scolding by Netero. They looked slumped. How about something? Buhara grabbed a handful of chocolates and stuffed them into his mouth. Hey, Men-Chi, are you asking about the strength of the candidates? Of course. Your pig, Men-Chi, snorted coldly and said, yes, although they were all eliminated originally, there were so many more people all of a sudden. Even though I really don't want to admit it, I have to say frankly that this year's candidates are really not bad. No. It should be said that there are a few guys in it, the strength is particularly strong. Saw times. What do you think? Hey, candidates who can be recognized by your Men-Chi, what else can I say? Sachi enjoyed his afternoon tea calmly, and nodded in agreement when he heard the words. This year is different from previous years. There is not a single qualified candidate. On the contrary. I think this year will be a big year, and there should be many qualified candidates. For example, the bald head in number 294. Men-Chi took over Saucy's words. That guy is one of the few guys who knows how to make sushi. And the white-haired brat on number 99. Sachi added, it can be seen that he is very talented. Of course, he's a member of the Zoldyck family. Was appointed as the next head of the Zoldyck family. Buhara interjected. In the room, it was as if the mute button was pressed for an instant, and fell into a long silence. Zoldyck ah. You better say the kid on the skateboard. It's a pity, is that kid really the only one who is powerful in his family? Not to mention that he also has an older brother, Gitteracker. Number 301, just that one. How did everyone stop talking about him? Buhara finished the chocolates on the table silently, looked at Men-Chi quietly, then looked at Saucy, hesitated for a while, and broke the silence. I say. We are lucky. Luckily the president arrived in time, otherwise. The consequences would be disastrous. As for Roy Zoldyck, the guy who can fight back and forth with the president, if Men-Chi really hates him. No way, big things will happen. Saucy lightly placed the teacup on the table, glanced at Men-Chi without a trace, and said leisurely, Roy Zoldyck is a different kind. From the first time he glanced at me, I knew that he was not simple. I just didn't expect that he, who was named the shame of the Zoldyck family, would be so exaggerated that he could do a few tricks with the president, to be honest. This is one of the few things that shocked me the most in my life. The image of the young man standing tall in the sky, with his back to the sun, waving his staff and knife, slashing and slashing the 100 styles of Avalokitesvara. Was deeply imprinted in Saucy's mind. He knew very well. This for the rest of my life, don't even think about clearing this picture out of my mind. This is talent. Men-Chi, who had always been at odds with Roy, raised her head after a long silence, took a deep breath and said, now that I think about it, I even doubt the purpose of full-length coming. What do you mean? Buhara and Sachi were stunned, looked at each other. Chi-Chi looked at Men-Chi. What's the matter? Didn't the president come to stop you from messing around? Men-Chi certainly wouldn't deny it, and slowly suggested another possibility. The main thing is to find out. I said, the chairman is probably mainly meeting that guy Roy Zoldyck, and the secondary thing is the exam. Men-Chi looked deeply at Buhara and Saucy, and gave his own reasons. Think about it, can a giant dragon sneak in among a group of examinees and lead him, can you rest assured? Besides, it's not certain who will be the real next head of the Zoldyck family. Men-Chi thinks of Kahlua, and really doesn't like him. He's a little bit better than Roy Zoldyck, that nasty guy. I guess he's a type B blood, self-willed and arrogant. It's not her Men-Chi vegetable. After your analysis, it really makes sense. Sachi wiped his mustache, and was about to say something suddenly. The flying boat shook violently, and the hull tilted, causing the room to tilt accordingly, and the tea on the table splashed out with a crash, which scared the three of Men-Chi, Buhara, and Saucy to jump. You three, stop guessing. At this moment, a voice that did not lose a trace of vitality came out. One ear Netero undoubtedly. President. What happened? What's the matter? A troublesome kid doesn't seem to want me to have fun with the ball. With a flash, Netero flied towards the deck, and said quietly, "You will know what happened in a while. Now listen to my order, Sat, you will drive the flying boat, go to the flight cabin. Bukhara, go to the waiting room and take care of those candidates who have passed out. As for these two brats, I will leave it to you, Men Chi. Remember, they are not allowed to go to Shenji." Ouch. 2 dumplings, one green and one white, were thrown in. Men Chi scooped it up and took a closer look. Gon with the left hand and Kahlua with the right, were stunned for a while, then raised their heads and looked at each other with Sachi and Bukhara. Immediately afterwards, a strong wind rushed into the tea room. As Netero said, they finally understood what happened. Roy Zoldyck, that guy, he's up to something. Sachi's eyes flickered, he was familiar. This domineering and fierce wind is none other than Roy Zoldyck's potential. It is powerful and majestic, and it is daunting. Expand, expand, expand. A radius of 100 meters. 200 meters, 300 meters. How far will the domineering arrogance released with all your strength radiate? This is a question that Roy has never considered in depth since he awakened the arrogance of the domineering color. He closed his eyes tightly and kept exploring his limits. His feet were rooted as if they were nailed to the deck. He was not affected by the flying ship at all, and his body didn't even move at all. Beside him, Fujitora held a stick and knife in his hand, carefully feeling the rhythm of Roy's domineering aura, and said in a low voice, "People are divided into grades, and arrogance naturally has its strengths and weaknesses. The wider the range of the Overlord color extension, the greater the upper limit. Since you know everything about the sea, you should know this. Just like what Fujitora said, Chi and Pity are divided into weak points. Katakuri can predict the opponent's next move in the next second. The armed color is better than the flower soldier Guro. Once the cherry blossoms come out, they can hurt the opponent from the inside. Not to mention the domineering look. Ming brother to Shanks or Garp, that is simply a sky, a ground, the difference is so big, like a moat. If I force this old man to make a classification of images, according to this old man, the domineering look can also be divided into streams." Fujitora raised 3 fingers, to give a few examples. The awakening range of the third-rate Overlord color is about 100 to 1000 meters, such as the former Shichibukai Doflamingo. The awakening range of the second-rate domineering color is 1000 to 10,000 meters. Kaido, Kiki, Charlotte Lingling are all here. As for first class, Fujitora squinted his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "Red-haired Shanks, white-bearded Edward Newgate, Lieutenant General Garp and his son Doragran, grandson Meng Chi D. Luffy, and Roger the Pirate King, who has been dead for many years, are all at this level. The coverage is as high as 10,000 meters. 10,000 meters. This is undoubtedly an astonishing number. The point is that the domineering look or the innate talent is something that cannot be awakened through hard work the day after tomorrow. It is as many meters as it is born, and then no room for improvement. So, Roy, let this old man see how far your talent can go." Fujitora's blind eyes opened and closed, and his eyes were fixed on Roy. Occasionally, he turned his head after taking a look. The people who came to the deck immediately looked back. Tread. At this time, several series of slight footsteps gathered on the deck from different positions. In a flash, Netero rushed to the scene with his hands behind his back, and stopped 10 meters in front of Roy. Then came Hisoka. And the Gitaraker, who came after Hisoka, that is, Ilfans. An old man and 2 young men stood on one side, keeping a subtle distance. No one said a word, and all eyes were fixed on Roy. At this time, the boy's black hair is flying upside down, his blind eyes are closed, his consciousness is immersed, and he is completely devoted to the road of exploring his own limits. 500 meters, 600 meters, 700 meters, 800 meters, 900 meters, 1000 meters. But there was a soft sound of bow, which came out faintly. Compared with the whistling wind, it was nothing to mention. But it was like Hong Zhong Dalu knocking on the Netero, Hisoka in the heart of Ilfans. Except for Netero, Hisoka and Ilfans suddenly shivered. A rare thought of surrender appeared in their hearts. "Boy, I remind you, don't get too close." Netero swept away with a pair of cloudy eyes mixed with half-clearness. Hisoka grabbed his face, buried his head in his chest, and smiled sullenly. "Ho, ho, ho, it's so interesting. As expected of my teacher Tiano. Even something as illusory as momentum can be cultivated. Is there anything he can't do? Ah, Sparasi. Don't be so charming now. Even if I kneel down and lick your feet. Hey, shit like love, we have been together for so many years, and I have never seen you lick me. Sure enough, love will disappear, right?" Ilfans gave Hisoka a blank look in disgust, feeling sour. Fortunately, The two had self-knowledge, and were very obedient and did not take a step forward. But. Don't come to me. I'll come to you. After lightly breaking the kilometer limit, Roy's closed blind eyes showed no signs of opening. His domineering look is like a wildfire. After the wind blows, it burns more and more fiercely, and continues to spread toward 2,000 meters, 1,000 meters, 4,000 meters. Visible to the naked eye, an invisible ripple rippled, and the birds hovering in the sky were flying freely and suddenly. All of them tilted their necks and turned their eyeballs, like dumpling, patong, patong, falling from the sky to the earth continuously. Second rate. If this kid is placed in the new world, he will be a king who is not weaker than Kaido of beasts. Fujitora secretly felt Roy's domineering carefully. He couldn't stop watching. The pair of blind eyes flashed, and an absurd idea came to mind. Could it be that he can expand further, or, in Fujitora's lifetime, he will also accept a disciple with the potential of One Piece? Oh ho ho ho, I'm really looking forward to it. The blind general's eyes are all naked. Watching, Roy is racing all the way. With a feeling in my heart, I raised my head and swept at the sky. Boom. Several muffled thunders exploded. The god, who lived in the skies, seemed to have discovered a heresy, and died in a rage. Its eyes glared, and its eyes turned into lightning. With a movement of the nostrils, the breathing turned into a gust of wind. He opened his mouth and spit out, and the rain poured down. In no time, the sky darkened, and dark clouds descended with violent storms and lightning. It seemed that they were going to kill Roy, a man who had offended the heavens. The domineering person who carries the domineering color is born to be a king. It seems that at the moment of awakening, there is always someone who is accompanied by misfortune. Brother Ming's family was tied to the city wall and pointed at the heart with a bow and arrow. Luffy saw Ace was about to be beheaded from the top. It seems that God does not allow a king to challenge its authority, and it will always send misfortune and thunder, destroy these in its eyes. The so-called spring is just like now. The sky was clear just now, and the white clouds were misty. In an instant, black clouds gathered, lightning and thunder, like the end of the world. It is chilling. Ho 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 ho, it's thundering. Should I go home and collect my clothes or continue to practice? How do you choose? The raindrops poured down like bullets. Netero squinted at Roy. The young man was unmoved, letting the rain hit his face. The resolute face matched with that a body of granite-like muscles reveals an unyielding will from the inside out. Affected by this will, the title, Foundation of the King, shone, and the domineering aura suddenly became agitated, as if it had wings, and spread out to the surrounding area with a buzz sound. In the blink of an eye we are approaching the 10,000 meter mark. Hurry up, it's just one step away. Roy, it's a worm, it's a dragon, just watch this one step. Yumu passed straight through Fujitora's body, and the blind general's hand holding the stick knife was tingling with veins. Opening and closing the blind eyes, the light is blooming, far more nervous than Roy himself. Oh ho ho ho, ilmi. Did you see that? Hisoka's flowing straight hair was wet by the rain, and fell down against his scalp. The perverted magician stuck out his tongue and licked a drop of rainwater and swallowed it into his stomach, then turned his head to look at Yi or Me. Yi or Me lowered her arms naturally, and asked calmly, what? King. With a swish sound, the Joker card was pinched in Hisoka's hand at some point. The Joker painted on the card as wearing a tall crown. The weirdness and horror. I have a hunch that killing him is the greatest magic in this world. Maybe. Ilmi stared at Roy with those dead fish eyes, and there were rare fluctuations in the black and white pupils. Looking back now, he actually didn't care about the younger brother in front of him at all. Understand? Don't even have his childhood voice and smile in his head. It is conceivable that the family chose to ignore. What a big mistake they made. Now that my father wants him to return, I'm afraid it will not be so easy. Different from Hisoka, Yi or Me suddenly had a premonition in his heart. After the test is over, when Roy returns home, the family may change. Wow. The rain is getting stronger. Under Saw C's control, the tilting airship finally turned around and regained its stability with great difficulty, but it was unexpected that the ape-faced examiners who encountered such severe and extreme weather were rarely angry. There is another one who can make trouble. I really don't know what the hell that kid Roy Zoldyck is doing. Buzz. The propellers are smashed together with the air and rain. The flying ship is under the black clouds, and there is no turning back. Saw C's heart became ruthless. He simply pulled the joystick and rushed out, which resulted in a. The rain became more urgent, the thunder became louder, and lightning flashed across the eyes from time to time. Scared Greta, Bob and the others jumped. Damn it, we won't tell you that we are here today. Rushing headlong into the rainstorm, is the pilot a fool? You're the fool. Isn't that the point? Shouldn't it be Teacher Tiano? I found that the pilot has already fainted. I don't know who is in the flight cabin now. I'm lucky that the plane didn't crash directly. Be content. Worried. The bad atmosphere is spreading. Buhara is a stupid man. He was assigned to take care of the candidates, and he listened to everything. He didn't intend to tell Greta and others at all, and now he is driving the flying ship as not someone else, but their examiner, the second time. However, even if he didn't say it, Kurapika, who is so wise as a demon, guessed it 9 out of 10. But he didn't say anything. Telling the truth now will not only increase everyone's worries, but it will not do any good. What's more, what Babu said just now is correct. The point is not the pilot, but Mr. Tianwei. When will he put away his aura? The pilot can wake up. This is the crux of the problem. Sigh. Mr. Tianwei is presumed to be so busy with cultivation that he has never thought about this at all. He can fly, but he forgot that there is a boatload of land ducks. Maybe. We trash, we don't even have the right to be remembered by him. Kurapika clenched his fists in his sleeves. He still had a big revenge to avenge. He must die here without knowing it. It was impossible. If he abandoned anyone, he had to find a way to survive. Yes, it is to give up. Give up the modeled thoughts in your mind, forget your own environment, and do your best to immerse yourself. Bathed in strong wind and rain. Roy gritted his teeth and let out a low growl. Come on. The domineering look roared out. 9,100 meters. 9,200 meters. 9,300 meters and finally got stuck at 9,700 meters. It's a pity that we are still 300 meters away from the 10,000 meter mark. Just stop like that. Fujitora swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It's hard to imagine that a phantom could be so nervous that he broke out in a sweat. Hey, it seems that this is the end of the line. I will try my best to adjust my status and present better content to fathers. After making such a big battle, fortunately that old man Maha is not here. Maybe he has to show off his precious grandson again. Netero looked at Roy with a piercing spirit, and felt that momentum came to an abrupt end. He raised his foot and was about to step forward. Clinker. Roy suddenly opened his blind eyes, thunder reflected in his pale eyes. He laughed. I want to end, have you asked me? What the foundation of the king, what domineering look. In heaven and earth, only I am the only one who can be called king. Only by fighting vertically and horizontally can Wei Jun Wanyu be called a tyrant. Can't even step into the first-class realm, and talk about overlords, it's ridiculous. Don't be enchanted, you can't survive. At this time, Roy's mouth was hooked into a deep versus shape, and he suppressed his voice bank and laughed in a low voice. The deck didn't stay at all, and kicked his feet. In Netero, Fujitora, Hisoka, Ilmi, and Hanzo who was hiding on one side were either shocked or horrified, and rushed straight into the dark clouds of thunder and rain. Climbing to the top. Do not enter the first class, or give up death. Clang. The stick knife was out of its sheath, and a snow-white light of the knife rushed towards Kong. I come. I see. I conquer. If you want to be king, if you don't have the courage to challenge the heavens, what kind of king are you? This may be the reason why Bawang's domineering is stuck at the 10,000 meter mark and cannot make an inch. Oh, boy, he's really lawless. Netero watched Roy go to heaven for 9 days, embrace the bright moon, and fight thunder, with indescribable emotions and loneliness. He thought that the other party was like himself when he was young. But the other party is not at all. He is Roy, the lively Roy, the vigorous Roy, the greedy Roy, the domineering Roy, the unwilling Roy, and finally gathered together, Roy who seems to surpass Netero. Teacher, blue is better than blue, and I will surpass what you show you. Beside Netero, Fujitora raised his head with a stick and sword in his hand. His eyes passed through the heavy rain, and looked at the man who drew the sword. The young man who wanted to split the thunder echoed the words he said in his mind. After a long time of being stunned, the corners of his mouth rose slightly, and he smiled in relief. That's right. Who said that talent is innate and cannot be changed? That's the argument of mortals. Do what others can't do, walk the road that others can't walk, maybe you can be the only one. This sentence is not someone else, it is Grape who said. He said that this is the second step in the cultivation of domineering, and it is also the key. It's just that I never thought about it, and before Fujitora told Roy, his disciple had already told him back with practical actions. The overlord has nothing to fear, even God can be bullied. Oh ho ho ho, Ilmi, give me a nail, I can't breathe. With a plop, Hisoka opened his arms and knelt in the heavy rain. He couldn't help but, incontinent again. I don't know how many times this is his. That man drew his knife, the blind man facing the sky, his favorite apple. It seems that it can bring him endless surprises every time. He can't help but be crazy about it. Fascinated by it. And even lose his self. Hey. Only at this time, you will think of me. I took out a nail and stabbed it fiercely in Hisoka's thigh. Peefed, blood spewed out. Abnormal magic teacher, let out a pleasant murmur. Dipped his hand in his own blood, put it in his mouth and licked it, rolled his eyes upwards. Indescribably wonderful. That's it. That's it. That's it. Dao. Why are you so attractive? Crazy. The ugly Hisoka. Kneeling on the deck mixed with his own blood and rain. Opening his mouth and laughing. That madness. Almost passed through the deck. Causing Kurapika, Greta, Babu, Burns, Chingli and others in the lounge to shudder involuntarily. Worry. Why'd I feel a little cold all of a sudden? It's eerie and weird. I always feel that something is wrong. Martial artist Chingli, a rigid man, hugged himself subconsciously. This is a defensive behavior made by the instinct of the body before his brain. It's a shame that you still practice martial arts, so you're afraid of an egg. Babu was wearing an Arab turban, and there were faint, hiss, sounds from the turban. It was because of the snake that he uttered such big words. Hey, look out of the window, Mado, Greta exclaimed, attracting everyone's attention. Barrett, who was watching over the candidates. Kurapika, who was silently leaning against the wall. Burns with flickering eyes and beautiful long blue hair. Followed Greta's gaze look at one. A night of thunderstorms. A blind man with his upper body naked, holding a stick knife in his hand, took off the wine gourd hanging from his waist, and took a mouthful of clear and sweet mountain spring water. Drilled into the dark clouds, raised the knife and slashed at the thunder and lightning. It's almost impossible to die. Damn, this guy is not a human being, if I'm not mistaken, it's Teacher Tiano. Greta shook his hand and slapped Bob. The real touch brought a little burning pain, proving that he was right. You're so easy to fight. Babu covered his face, completely ignoring Greta, just as Greta said, 10 and 10 middle-end teachers don't think of themselves as human beings. Facing the thunder and lightning. He dislikes being the strongest with humans, and he can't enjoy fighting, so he wants to live with God? This is too outrageous. Outrageous. That's why. This is my idol, as if he had recovered. Bao Kuer, as the first examinee to wake up, stood up while leaning on the wall. He was trembling. He came to the window in a trembling manner, looked at Roy with hot eyes, muttered in a low voice. This is what the Pirate King looks like. It's very Dao-sensei. Yes, he will always make you feel that this is his limit, break your perception of him, and do things that make you even more jaw-dropping. So, such a person, do I really have a chance to follow in his footsteps? A pair of amber eyes, gradually evolving to a deep fiery red. Kurapika watched Roy slashing Lidu crazily with a knife. The desperation in my heart is like a flood that has broken its embankment. Once it overflows, it will be out of control. Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know if Men-Chi saw it. Beside him, Buhara opened his mouth, feeling more and more lucky that he and Men-Chi were lucky. If the president didn't come to Roy Zoldyck, a horrible guy, even if he didn't use a knife, he and Men-Chi could be torn alive. Are you scared? The old lady is also scared. Men-Chi, who is obediently staying in the tea room with the two little devils, seems to have forgotten the task Netero gave her. She looked at the sky in a daze, and heard the screams of the prickly-haired kid, and the white-haired brat, staring straight at the man in the dark clouds. Bathed in thunder and lightning, completely insane. People are directly numb. Is fighting with others not enough for this guy? Do you have to go to heaven to find death? Men-Chi's words seem to have hit the heart of Shang Sheng. Looking at the little ants who dare to swing their knives at it, there are several buckets of thunder and lightning, boom. He asked Roy one after another. It's about to crush Roy, a daring bug. Are you angry? Roy swung his sword backhand, and sent the bolts of lightning flying. The lightning passed into his body along the stick knife, but he was overwhelmed by his armed look, which was not as thick ink. Look, it's also domineering. Why is your domineering look so unbelievable? 9,997 meters? Who do you look down on? Roy growled, look at me. That pair of blind eyes scanned the dark clouds. Then his figure flashed, looking for the thunder and lightning that hadn't yet formed and killed him. Fighting against the heavens is a joy. The unwilling blind man can no longer wait for the heavens to show his power. He wields a stick and knife in his hand, counts until he strikes, and under the frantic strangulation. The prompt sound on the panel suddenly rang in his mind. Battle days have feelings, remind the host, experience value +10. The cultivation of the state of mind cannot be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. After the last time I climbed to the sky and watched the scenery for nothing, I spent 10 experience points for nothing. Unexpectedly, Roy triggered the mood switch again, and greeted the respect he deserved with his unyielding fighting spirit. Give me all these 10 points of experience and add it to my energy. The 10,000-meter mark? Lord, let him break it for you now. Yes. A flash of light flashed across the panel, and the column dedicated to Roy's magnanimity suddenly went up a bit. Name: Roy Zoldyck. Air volume: 230. Right pointing arrow 240. Normal person 10. Remarks: 1 level breaks the limit. Attachment: the title, Foundation of the King, has been strengthened. Current domineering color: 9,997 meters. Right pointing arrow 13,000 meters, first class. Boom. It sounded like the soft sound of an eggshell cracking, and it spread abruptly. The domineering look that had been stagnant seemed to be pushed from behind forcefully by someone, and broke through the 1,000-meter barrier. It swept out with a stronger wave. Netero, Hisoka, Ilmi standing on the deck, and Hanzo hiding on the side bear the brunt of being hit by an invisible hammer head-on. The spirit body broke away from the body and flew out. I'm going. How did I see myself? The man was flying in the sky, but Hanzo saw himself on the deck, and the cat was peeping cautiously behind the wall. He still didn't understand what was going on. Looked around, and saw 2 Hisoka at the same time. The 2 ill-charming couldn't help being stunned, and suddenly became excited. Could this be the shadow clone technique that I've been pursuing so hard? This kind of ninjutsu that should be sealed in the ninja secret volume in the legend, how could it appear in Tianwei's smash? It shouldn't be. Fart. Hey, don't be blinded by emptiness. When it's time to wake up, a faint voice came into Hanzo's ears. The bald man saw a tall Guanyin elephant appear in front of his eyes at some point, stretched out his hand to grab him, and gently stuffed him into his body. Along with him is Hisoka. Ilmi. The 3 of them felt that the sky was spinning before their eyes, and they returned to the deck with a second look. Their eyes were clear and bright, and they were no longer as confused as before. It's the president. Hanzo, Hisoka, and Ilmi came to their senses and glanced at Netero. The golden light dissipated and Avalokitesvara was not there. Netero had his hands behind his back, still turned his back to the 3 of them, and never looked back at them. Those black and white eyes, full of years of wind and frost, were staring at Roy in the sky from beginning to end. What the 3 of them didn't know was that, for a moment just now, the most dignified human being was quite frightened. Even the 100 styles of Avalokitesvara were forced to come out. This is a situation that Netero has never encountered since the completion of martial arts. It's a breakthrough. Different from the native Netero. Fujitora stared at his iconic pair of blind eyes, locked Roy firmly, and felt the new domineering blooming from him. The familiar as a general, he was fortunate to have seen it on the legendary naval hero Grape. Hey ho ho ho, is this old man witnessing history? Someone really broke the shackles of talent and forcibly expanded the coverage of Bawang's domineering. It's a pity that this is a different world, otherwise, Mr. Grape will be surprised. Fujitora's usually peaceful face showed a rare flush of excitement. Seeing Roy breaking the barrier, he immediately shouted at Roy. Strike while the iron is hot. Imagine that the overlord color is your armed color. Try to mobilize it. Command it. Follow the do what you want. The roots of Roy's ears moved slightly, the corners of his mouth hooked upwards, and he scolded lightly. Traveling. The domineering arrogance sweeping all directions was suddenly withdrawn, and all gathered on Roy's staff and saber. In an instant, the stick knife was dyed into a heart-stirring red-gold color. Afterwards, the blind man held up the fiery stick knife and slashed at the dark cloud. Crack. Time and space seemed to be frozen at this moment. But see. The dark cloud was like a mirror, it shattered, and the bright moon came out. The sky is cracked. The bright light shines down. The wind is gone, the rainstorm is gone, and the thunder and lightning dissipate. The world seems to have been pressed the freeze button at this moment, and the previous tranquility has been restored. Tyrant. This should be regarded as self-taught. The moonlight shone on Fujitora's face, and the blind general looked up at the young man standing in the bright moon. It was hard to imagine that the other party, only with just one sentence of his own, he comprehended the profound meaning of domineering. This kind of comprehension, combined with his first-class domineering. What kind of height Roy can hit in the future? Fujitora can't even imagine. Lowest, it won't be worse than that redhead. Shaking his head and smiling bitterly, Fujitora felt as if he hadn't done anything, and it was over. He said he was teaching Roy to be tyrannical, but he didn't have any sense of participation in it. Next to him, a slap woke up Hanzo, Hisoka, and Ilmi, and Netero laughed twice and looked up at Roy with indescribable jealousy. The dead old man really gave birth good grandson. In this respect, I am no match for him. A certain unfilial son appeared in his mind. Netero regretted giving him the name Byongda it really was forced to raise. Oh ho ho ho. Ilmi, let's go. Relying on a frivolous illusion to cover the scar on his thigh, Hisoka staggered up, with his back to Netero and Roy in the sky. Stepping on his pair of clown shoes, he walked towards the lounge on the first floor. Yi or me glanced at him unexpectedly. Aren't you going to say goodbye to your new love? As a licking dog, I left without the owner's permission. Is it because my younger brother is not well trained? No. Tano is perfect, but now I'm like a clown compared to him. Hisoka stopped in his tracks, took out the box of playing cards from his pocket, opened his arms, threw it to the sky, and murmured, "But I clearly want to be a magician." Clown. What's the matter? Rustling, the playing cards were swept by the strong wind, and I don't know where they flew. Fans took another look, and Hisoka was no longer on the deck. He was slightly absent-minded. When he mentioned the clown, he felt that he was more like a clown than Hisoka, an outsider. In other words, from the moment the entire Zoldyck family ignored Roy and let him fend for himself, everything was wrong. Turned into a clown. It's better not to live than to live. Yurmi lifted his heels up to Hisoka, and also disappeared on the deck. After leaving a word, the wind blows and disappears in the air. However, it doesn't seem to be me who should have a headache now. Who is the current owner of the Zoldyck family? Silva also. But it has nothing to do with his fans. Candidate lounge on the first floor. Ahem. It's fake. Witnessing that Roy smashed the dark cloud with a knife, Greta took a sip of water and almost choked himself. It's not the first day you met Teacher Tianwei. Pence's pleasant voice rang out, and he gave Greta a disgusted look, and the other party's saliva spurted out, almost staining her shoes. Chang Ru Teacher Tianwei. It seems that he did something shocking, so there is no need to make a fuss. That's right, anyway, I'm numb. Babu stroked a naughty little snake that came out of his turban, leaned half of his body against the wall, and said, "It feels less numb than being bitten by a snake." That's just right. You two raise bees and the other snakes, just fight poison with poison and heal each other. Martial artist Xing Li folded his arms and said with a smile. Directly remember the backstab, stabbed into anger from embarrassment. You seemed to be okay when you were joking. But, Xing Li, you bastard, please stay away from me. Bao Kuer pinched his nose, rolled his eyes and said, "Damn martial artist. Why is Tian Wei that slash by the teacher just now scared me to pee?" Bang Kuer. I'll kill you. The quiet lounge began to fly around. Seeing this, Kurapika shook her head, turned her back to the corner, lay down next to Leorio, and breathed a sigh of relief. Congratulated that she had lived another day. Beside him, Leorio slept very peacefully. Kurapika even saw the tip of his nose bubbling. I can't say, I'm quite envious of him. As for the other candidates, as Roy regained his domineering aura, one after another, some people came to their senses. After being ordered to die by Netero, Buhara, who was in charge of the care, wiped the sweat from his forehead. While he breathed a sigh of relief, he couldn't help but look out the window a few more times. Even a thunderbolt could strike the broken boy. I don't know if Men Chi has seen it. I think her expression must be very exciting now. Go away, two annoying little brats. The door of the tea room opened with a bang, and then the two dumplings were thrown out by Men Chi one by one. I don't know if they were venting their feelings resentment or something. Gon lay on Kilua's belly, clutching his head and crying out for pain. It directly drew Kilua's big white eyes. Damn it. It's me who should cry for pain. That is. It seems that you and my brother are friends. Otherwise, I will kill you. Why are you so stingy? Gon glanced at Kilua. By the way, are you really Uncle's younger brother? Why is he so strong? You are so weak, Kilua. I really want to kill you. After the game of grabbing the ball, the scene of you chasing me and running away is staged in the flying boat again. I have to say, it's nice to be young. Netero saw Roy sheathing his knife, stepping on moon steps, and slowly came to the deck. He laughed and said, "Boy, congratulations on your progress." So. Roy smiled modestly and said, "Small progress like this can only be done with hands." Ho. Boy, are you sure this is humility, right? The corners of Netero's eyes twitched. Not only does this old man have hands, but he also has 100 of them. Why don't you see me improving every day? So. Sometimes, humility is also a virtue, Roy. Netero twirled his beard and taught Roy in a superior manner. Don't start to be arrogant just because you have made a little progress. Otherwise it will just destroy you. That's what I said. But I'm telling the truth. Roy glanced at Netero noncommittally, then turned to Fujitora and raised his eyebrows. You say so, teacher. Tick-tock. Reminder. There is still time left before Fujitora dissipates. 10 minutes, 59 seconds and 6 milliseconds. In other words, that's right, it's time to say goodbye. Fujitora smiled and looked at Sora. There are no long pavilions and ancient roads, no luxuriant grass, only the blue sky. There are also blind men, old and young, who also hold sticks and knives. Pretentious words are not the master of the old man, but... Fujitora stared at Roy with piercing eyes and said, "Today I want to say something. Roy, I'm so proud of you. Looking forward to seeing you next time." "Teacher, I still say that." Roy showed his face and smiled. Fujitora frowned and said with a smile, "I understand. Overtake me, right? If there is such a day, I don't mind inviting a few shooting stars to celebrate." "Teacher, you are sure it is a meteor, and not a meteorite, right?" Roy blinked. "Good guy, when the time comes when such a big meteorite hits his head, I am afraid that Geno will spit out a mouthful of old blood. Even the Dragonstar group may not be able to withstand it." "Who knows?" Fujitora drew back his sword, winked at Roy rarely, and pointed his finger at his forehead. Ripples from the flowering energy in the void. A little brilliance bloomed. The panel hidden in the depths of Roy's consciousness began to undergo earth-shaking changes. "Child, old man, let's go." The figure dissipated from the feet to the head. Fujitora retracted his fingers, and waved to Roy with a smile. Roy watched him leave, and hurriedly said, "Teacher, don't forget to say hello to my teacher's wife Charlotte Lingling for me." Fujitora. "You boy. Next time I wait for the blind general to flick the justice cloak behind his back. Before it dissipates, he turns around and gives Roy an angry look. Let's make you proud for a while. Clean you up." Roy smiled. "That's all right, I'll wait." Afterwards, watching Fujitora completely disappear into the world, he sank down, took off the wine gourd hanging from his waist, took a mouthful of clear and sweet mountain spring water, gritted his teeth and began to accept the template transformation. Boom. Massive amounts of life energy, engulfed in Fujitora's years of cultivation experience, poured into Roy's tinling cap. Roy's breath changed instantly. At this moment, Netero heard the teeth stinging, creak, sound from the friction and compression of the bones, and looked at it in shock. The blind man will do what he says. In terms of progress, as long as he really has hands, he will start to transform in front of him. First of all, the stature is taller, reaching an astonishing 2.5 meters, which is directly half the height of Netero. Then the bone density increased, driving the muscle to tear and reorganize. Visible to the naked eye, those bloody red spots reappeared, densely covered on Roy's body surface, and he could faint directly. Fortunately, Netero is more or less a legend who came back alive from the Dark Continent. He has seen a lot of strange things, and he is somewhat immune to it. But when he says he becomes stronger, he becomes stronger. When this kind of person really appears in front of him. Even though Netero is well informed, he was stunned for a while. Oh. The old man remembers that it hasn't been long since this kid's chi and blood broke the limit. Why did God's kung fu flash away, and he became stronger again? At this rate, then what is his hard work for more than 100 years? A pile of shit. The strongest human being can't help but start to doubt life. He stared blankly at Roy. The young man closed his blind eyes, frowned, and endured the pain brought about by the further strengthening of his physique. He couldn't bear it anymore, so he poured a mouthful of mountain spring water. No matter how bad it was, he poured the mountain spring water directly on his head. But in an instant, the erythema was scalded by the exuberant chi and blood, turned into water vapor, and evaporated directly. Reminder. The current unlocking progress of Fujitora's smile template, 50% right pointing arrow 60%. The various attributes are improved as follows. Name. Roy Zoldyck. Bone age, 17. Physique. 150 right pointing arrow 180. Normal person 10, speed. 170 right pointing arrow 199. Normal person 10. Power. 201 right pointing arrow 231. Normal person 10, remarks. 1 level breaks the limit. Air volume. 230 right pointing arrow 270. Normal person 10, remarks. 1 level breaks the limit. Template character. Fujitora smiles. Current unlock progress, 60%. Experience value. 1. Title, Tomb of the King, Overlord Domineering has been awakened. First class. Props. Power ATM machine, consumes 100 million rings and can store 1 ton of power. Current storage amount. 0. After breaking the limits of capacity and power, Roy's speed has finally reached the limit of mortals. It is only 1 step away from breaking the limit, becoming a saint, and stepping into the realm of ghosts and gods. Step away. Many small authors are less crack the sound of stir-fried beans continued to explode from Roy's body. Noticing that the speed has reached the limit of ordinary people, Roy's eyes flickered, he opened his mouth and took a deep breath, and punched out fiercely. Ha! There was a soft sound of paw. The fist had already reached Netero's eyes, and the sound slowed down by half a beat before reaching Netero's ears. Netero couldn't help being in a trance for a moment. It seems that I saw the day when I achieved great martial arts, that punch I swung at my teacher, and the same punch speed exceeded the speed of sound. It made his teacher shed tears of excitement, and played a reverse apprenticeship operation. However, what Netero didn't expect was, time flies, a period of time. Someone also performed this trick in front of him. The former student has become teacher, and Roy, as a preparatory hunter who is about to obtain a hunter license, has also become the he of the year. It has to be said that fate mediates good fortune, and it is the best at playing tricks on people. Oh ho 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 ho. Somewhat exaggerated, human beings are the strongest, and they have their own pride. In the original book, Singled Out, Ant King is a clear proof. So, I want the old man to pay homage. The boy is still far behind. The old man put his hands behind his back, straightened his back, witnessed Roy's transformation, looked up at the young man who could cover him with only his shadow, squinted his eyes, and said with a sneer, "Be careful not to overwhelm the child, too much it's time, kid." A weak foundation and forced improvement will indeed leave hidden dangers, but for Roy, who has completely inherited Fujitora's deep roots, the so-called hidden dangers do not exist at all. Roy stretched out a hand and patted Netero's shoulder, looked at him sympathetically and said, "It's okay to be jealous. You'll become more jealous after staying with me for a long time." Netero. As expected of the grandson of the dead old man, he speaks really nicely. Netero shook his shoulders, shook Roy's hand away, turned around and calmly moved towards the second floor. Jealous? Pass the hunter test first before making such a big deal, boy. Netero said meaningfully. The hunter test can't be passed by strength alone, it can't be done without brains. Tisk. Digging inside, I really don't know, there are still problems in this world that can't be solved by fists. Roy watched Netero disappear in a flash, lightly touched his fist, and the air and sound were instantly crushed by him, forming a short-lived hollow. This void is deep and empty, and one can't help but be afraid at a glance. Fortunately, there is no one else on the deck except Roy, who is leaning on the railing and looking at the scenery. Only the howling wind seems to be telling someone what happened just now. Flight compartment. Pain, hiss. What's wrong with me? Sachi. Why are you here? This is the flight cabin, not a place for you to stay. Get out. After a group of examinees, the comatose pilot also woke up after a long rest period. When he opened his sleepy eyes, he saw a gentleman with a mustache. When he was sitting in his position and manipulating the flying ship, he was immediately dumbfounded. Climbing and kicking, directly blasted Saw C out. Sachi spread his hands and said, hey. As soon as he got out of the flight cabin, he heard the cabin door slam shut with a bang sound, and he took a closed door punch. I didn't expect the captain's temper to be so bad, no. In the original book, the legendary captain who dared to kick Gon and Kahlua and throw them out did not deserve his reputation. Sachi simply patted the dust stuck to his clothes, took out his cell phone from his pocket without paying any attention, opened the address book and found a guy with the note, coxcomb head, dialed the number without hesitation. Hey, Satsu, what wind brought you here? Kaba. This guy is eating big fortune pancakes again, sooner or later you will be fat. Sachi said with a blank face. Liber, let's get down to business. Roy Zoldyck is going to your place. Be careful, don't annoy him, be careful not to eat and go around. There was a click. A certain bounty hunter with a coxcomb hair and a pair of aggressive pink-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, plucked his ears, and said in disbelief, Roy Zoldyck. Who is that? As for scaring you like this. Yes. I'm just afraid. With Lieber's understanding of Sachi, it's not easy at all to make the other parties say, I can't eat and walk around, too. Zoldyck. Don't you know who it is? A member of the killer family. I just had a fight with the president today, and the outcome was tied. Peefed. A mouthful of Dafu biscuits spewed out. Libo yelled strangely, pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose, and almost choked to death. It's a tie in TM. Is it you, Sachi, talking nonsense, or is my Liber deaf? Liber grabbed the phone and shouted. Please explain to me what TM's tie is burden. Literally. Sax seemed to expect Liber to have this kind of reaction, and spent a little more time talking about the scene of Roy fighting Netero, as well as the amazing performance of the other party's 2 consecutive barriers along the way. Speak and listen to Liber. I just listened to the other end of the phone, and the sound disappeared. The excitement was gone, and the numbness seemed to be gone. There was only a long silence and a slight electric current. Worry. According to what you're saying, the president can just give him the hunter license, wouldn't that be the end of it? So awesome. He still has a fart in the exam. So, didn't I just remind you to come here? Sachi said calmly. You don't have to worry too much, you can do whatever you want. Roy Zoldyck is strong, but he may not be able to overcome the strange difficulties of your trap tower. That's true. Li Bo sighed, and said to himself, my test is not just about strength, if he really can't pass, he can't blame me. Sa Si nodded approvingly. Of course, I will collect your body later, so you don't have to worry about that. Ryber. F***KNM. With a snap, the phone was directly disconnected. Beep. Blind tones came from the other end of the phone. Sa Si shrugged his shoulders expressionlessly, and stuffed the phone into his pocket with his backhand. He, who should be reminded, has already reminded him as a friend. If a certain coxcomb doesn't appreciate it, it's none of his business. Tread. The gentleman stepped on the leather shoes, and disappeared straight away like a robot with stiff limbs. In the empty corridor, the humming sound of the propeller smashing the air reverberates from time to time. The next day, the scorching sun rose and the first ray of morning glow fell. The flying boat is fully loaded with candidates and finally came to the third level, the trap tower. Squeak. The cabin door opened, and candidates came in and out one after another. Hanging behind Roy, Gon called out carefully, Uncle, let's go too. After finishing speaking, he turned his head and glanced at the cat's white-haired stinky brother at the back of the crowd, stuck out his tongue and made a grimace, slightly. The shoulders that I dare not even see my brother Kahlua, I Gon look down on you. Damn it. You're such a villain. Isn't it just relying on my brother's prestige, and you're letting me talk about it? Kahlua gave Gon a hard look, and waved his hand in the gesture of a knife. Look at that, he must find a chance to kill him. There is still Shenshin making trouble here. After admiring the farce performed by these two little devils secretly, Roy swung one arm, and a wine gourd passed over the heads of the crowd, and crashed straight into Kahlua's arms. You have 5 minutes to fill up the wine for me. Don't mind, brother, I'll go right away. Kahlua didn't care about the pain in his chest from being hit by the wine gourd, and before Roy could finish speaking, he ran into the tea room in a hurry, in front of Netero, Sa Si, Men Chi, Buhara's face, picked up the red wine stored in the corner, and poured it into the wine gourd with a bang bang. This is my wine. Little brat, do you know what you're doing? Buhara was stunned for a moment, and after he realized it, he was about to slap Kahlua for clinker. Kahlua Yiren said without fear, my brother asked me to drink it. Immediately, Buhara slammed on the brakes and quickly retracted his hand. Roy Zoldyck. How can it be repaired? I can't bear it. Kahlua is secretly cool. No wonder Gon is more affectionate than his own brother. It's because his damn second brother Tigerskin is so easy to use. Ton. One bottle after another bottle of red wine has run out. I don't know how Roy's wine gourd is made, so it can be filled, and in a short while, I will consume a few of the treasures that Buhara collected. Erjing, the fat man looks pained. Tisk. Sorry. Men Chi patted Hara's big belly, secretly thankful. Fortunately, she didn't hide wine on board, otherwise, this wave would be a disaster. Oh, it's okay. Tell that little bastard Roy. There is no such thing as a free lunch in this world, he can only drink, and the old man will ask his great-grandpa for it. Netero kicked Kahlua, who was getting more and more excessive, and then gave Buhara a comforting look, turned his head and said to Sachi next to him. Duzi is not here, I will leave the introduction of the rules to you up. Remember, no one is allowed to go down the surface of the trap tower to the bottom of the tower. Aren't there man-eating birds? Men Chi asked Netero back. Those guys are not simple. Anyone who dares to climb down the surface of the trap tower will be cut up and eaten by them. You're stupid. Buhara was comforted by Netero, and seemed to be in a better mood. She even had the courage to talk back to Men Chi. As soon as she said it, she realized the big crisis. Hurriedly explained with a smile. Have you forgotten how all the monsters behaved when Roy Zoldyck first appeared in the warehouse? It's too late for them to avoid Roy Zoldyck, how could they be so stupid to get up to them? Men Chi. Looking at Netero and Sachi in embarrassment. It seems that she is the only one who has forgotten this kind of thing, but she really wants to dig a hole and bury herself. Oh, okay. Netero was born in time, gave Menchi a step down and said, Saji, you stay, Menchi, Buhara, you two go back to the Hunter Association with me 1 or 2. Yes. The buzzing sound of the propeller shredding the air became more and more urgent. Under the gaze of Sachi, the airship carrying Netero, Menchi and Buhara rose into the sky and turned into a small black dot on the horizon. At this time, Roy, Gon, Kurapika, Leorio, Bing Hisoka, ILMI, couple, as well as candidates Hanzo, Bokuer, Babu, Burns, Chingli, etc., all stood in the third stage. In front of the door, the top of the trap tower. Ahem. The poor bean-faced man was detained by Maha as a slave in the president's office. In desperation, Sachi obeyed Netero's order and took his place, coughing dryly to attract everyone's attention, began to explain the exam rules of the third pass to the candidates. Pay attention to it. Sachi cleared his throat, and his gaze swept over the candidates, focusing on Roy for a moment, Wang said. This is the top of the tower known as the Trap Tower, and it is also the starting point of the third test. All you have to do is pass to the top of the tower and reach the bottom of the tower within 72 hours. Remember, it is not allowed to fly down directly along the outer edge of the tower. Otherwise the result will be cancelled, and it will be treated as elimination. Candidates. Subconsciously looking at Roy. Only he is the only one flying. As expected of Mr. Dao, a man who successfully made the examiner modify the examination rules. Roy was expressionless, turning a blind eye, and didn't take the eyes of the candidates seriously at all. He took off the wine gourd comfortably, took a sip of red wine, and inadvertently glanced at the floor. In a room full of monitors, the coxcomb-headed man who was eating a big fortune pancake was so startled that he almost choked on the pancake crumbs. Maid, did he see me? Roy's twirling blind eyes filled the entire monitor. I almost didn't scare Ryber to death. This is the bottom of the tower. Even if that guy has sharp eyesight, he shouldn't be able to see here. Or, he awakened Yuan, but the circle, with a coverage that can wrap the entire trap tower, is too exaggerated. Cough cough. Water. Libo punched his chest with a fist, and took a sip of the water handed over by the two prison guards behind him, and then he regained his strength. Maid. Too impotent. Not only Liber was taken aback, but also the two prison guards. Fortunately, they didn't have the treatment that Libo got, and they could still eat while watching the surveillance morning tea, so I didn't get choked. A blessing in disguise. Who is this blind man? Number 405. Boss, do you want to check his information? The trap tower is actually a prison, and the staff, including Liber and the other two younger brothers, are all prison guards. This is a guard, with professional habits. He is about to check Roy's information, but he is stopped by Liber with gestures. There's no need to look it up. With such a keen sense, there's no one else but that man. Which man? The two prison guards looked at each other and looked at each other. After following Libo for so long, this is the first time I saw his tone so serious, even a little heavy? Indeed, it's more than heavy. Liber now feels that Alexander, and doesn't know what the president thinks, throwing a monster over. Isn't this a hot potato? Crack, and bit down a piece of Dafu biscuit fiercely, Liber said angrily. Who else can it be? Roy Zoldyck. That is, the man who won't lose the wind against the president. Two prison guards, like door gods. One on the left and one on the right stood behind Libo, and they froze immediately. 50-50 with the president. Boss, I suggest giving him the green light and letting him pass directly. Such a scary guy. If we make him unhappy, he must dismantle our trap tower? Or, some people are crowmouths. The two prison guards just finished speaking, when they saw Roy in the surveillance screen, stretched out a finger and nodded towards them. His lips moved slightly. 10 billion, otherwise. Roy smiled, and the protruding finger was instantly stained with a red gold, and exuded a hint of domineering taste from it. Damn. Here we go again. Dao-sensei, they are all of us. Please collect your supernatural powers, don't accidentally hurt your allies. Domineering. Just experienced a group of candidates who were stunned by Roy's domineering look, sniffing this familiar smell, and immediately panicked. A certain uncle, seeing this, didn't even want his briefcase, so he grabbed Kurapika directly, and the cat was behind him. Co-authoring me has become your shield, right? Kurapika looked sullenly, turned and glared at Leorio. What are you doing? Leorio smiled smugly. The sun is a bit poisonous, I will be in your shadow. Kurapika. God damn cool, don't you look at what time it is. The sun has just risen, okay. The blonde boy was speechless, and smiled coldly. Believe it or not, I'll just lie down and show you. However, before the words fell to the ground. Patong, patong. Seeing that the situation was not good, the candidates simply lay down first, so as to save themselves from fainting later, and kowtowed their heads. At the top of the huge trap tower, there was a strange scene. Except for a few people standing sporadically, all the candidates were present, and they collectively fainted. This scene seems to have been seen only yesterday. Oh ho ho ho. This is a blatant threat, right? A perverted magician, with an indescribably beautiful expression, licked his tongue, glanced at Sachi and said, "If I were the examiner. Can't bear it, then don't bear it. You can also choose to lie down, instead of being angry with me here." The corners of Sachi's eyes twitched, looking at the dead corpse, lying on the ground, and Hisoka, Ilmi, Hanzo, Babu, Burns and others who were jokingly looking at him. He suddenly regretted accepting this explaining the rules task. See. To some people, the rules of bullshit are just a piece of paper. Roy Zoldyck, as an examinee, I hope you can abide by the exam rules. Zoldyck took a deep breath, and his tone was somewhat flattering. Roy glanced at him and smiled. Did I not follow the rules? You just said you couldn't fly down from the outside, but you didn't say you couldn't fly down from the inside, did you? Besides, I didn't tell you about, and you are not the examiner of this exam. I advise you not to overstep your authority and meddle in your own business. Roy withdrew his gaze and looked straight at the flashing red dot on the top of the trap tower. How to say? Liber and the two prison guards leaned back unconsciously, and he could feel how unusual Roy's domineering fingers wrapped in gold and red domineering colors were just by sight. 10 billion? Give it to him. Give me the phone, I'll ask the president for reimbursement. Damn. This hot potato, whoever picks it up, anyway, I don't pick it up. Libo was frightened. He looked past Roy, and saw Sachi who was winking at him from behind. He rushed behind and said, "Why are you still standing there?" "Oh, here we come." The younger brother gave a jolt, took out his mobile phone, dialed the number of the president's office, and handed the mobile phone to Libo carefully. "Hey, President? Something big happened. That Roy Zoldyck is going to bring down my trap tower." "Bullshit. You can call my grandson's name?" In the president's office, Maha put Erlang's legs on Netero's desk, grabbed the microphone and cursed, "Punish you 10 billion, and apologize to my grandson." "Riber. Who are you?" Lieber's heart tightened. It was obviously not Netero's voice. Hey, he's a bad old man who has nothing to do and is full of food." Squeak. The office door was pushed open from the outside. Netero, with a single ponytail, a martial arts uniform, and wooden clogs, walked in with his hands behind his back. The moment he saw him, the bean-faced man yelled for president, slipped on his knees, rushed to Netero, hugged his thigh tightly, and almost fainted from crying. "Woo. I finally waited for you." Do Mionren wailed silently. "You don't even know how I got here these days." "Maha. That bad old man, he is not human, okay. Netero touched Do Mion's smooth forehead, comforted him, and walked slowly to Maha, snatched the phone, and glared at him angrily, saying, "Old man, this is the Hunter Association, not your home, so don't meddle in it." Sigh. Young people just don't talk about martial arts, and bully me, a weak old man. I don't care. In short, tens of billions are indispensable. Maha slapped his desk, and he really didn't take him as a Hunter Association. My home. Netero frowned, and glanced at the TV. On the screen, Roy's fingers were wrapped around his domineering corpse, and his feet were covered with corpses. Fly back on the spot and have a good chat about life with this kid. As soon as the old man left, "You made trouble with your hind feet." Who was the young man? Who doesn't talk about martial arts? The old man knows. 10 billion. The association will report it to you. Thank you, President. Lieber breathed a sigh of relief, and told Roy the news through the microphone. Roy smiled in satisfaction, but gave him a high look. He didn't expect the other party to be so witty, which was beyond his expectation. "I thought it would take some trouble, but it seems that there is no need for it." On the Netero side, Roy looked at Sax expressionlessly and said, "The old man walked too fast, he probably ran out to avoid debts. Please call him and ask, when will my 11 billion be given to me?" 11 billion? Isn't it 10 billion that was promised? Sachi was a little confused, and said with a dry smile, "Then the extra billion." "Interest." Roy said as a matter of course, "Since he is overdue, it's not too much for me to charge him 1 billion interest." "It's not too much, but I suspect that the president will faint from anger if he knows." Sachi didn't dare to delay, and directly reported this matter to the special case. "Once connected to 2 phones, and there is a bad old man who doesn't like it, no matter how good-tempered Netero is, he will inevitably get a little angry. Maha thinks so." But to his surprise, Netero was quite calm. After hanging up the phone, he even called Dumian directly. 11 billion was given to Roy. Skip the rest of the test and advance the feasibility of issuing Roy a hunter license. Bean-faced man. Surprised. He has never seen the president break an exception for anyone. Even the gold did not have this treatment back then, right? Maha raised his eyebrows, and was also shocked. He looked at Netero, but he didn't expect that the kid who always regarded himself as a principal would break his own principles for Roy. However, thinking about it, this is also it's unexpected, it makes sense. After all, the one who made an exception was none other than Maha's grandson. Hee. You're on the road, kid. I told you to give it to you directly, but you didn't listen. Now you know. If you don't listen to the old man, you will suffer in front of your eyes. With his hands behind his head, Maha comfortably rocked Netero's office chair, feeling indescribably complacent. A vein appeared on Netero's forehead, and he didn't bother to argue with him. The most important thing now is to invite Roy, the kid who disrupts the balance of the exam at any time, out. He is here, not to mention 10 billion, even 30 billion, 40 billion. It is estimated that he will not be able to keep it. But how can there be any reason in this world to pay someone to take the exam? The kid knew that this was taking all the candidates as hostages, and forcing him to submit to the Hunter Association. The chairman of the conference finally came to his senses. The bean-faced man called, "Wake up," and ignorant bee waved his hand to signal him to go down and inform. Yes. Do Myeonran walked out the door in a daze with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, and immediately notified the second in command of the Hunter Association. The current vice president, the contemporary child mouse, Paris Stonehill. Knock, 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 Vice President, are you there? There was a knock on the vice president's door. A sexy, deep and clear voice sounded from inside the house. Please come in. Hi. The Do-Mian man swallowed a mouthful of saliva, pushed open the door, walked in, and saw a young man with beautiful blonde hair, wearing an exquisite suit and a wine-red tie around his neck, folded his hands, resting his chin, looked at the bean-faced man with a smile, and said, "Yo, good morning." Go. Good morning. Do Myeonran lowered his head and did not dare to meet the handsome young man in front of him. The way he smiled, Do Myeonran felt inexplicably frightened in his heart, always feeling that the other party had malicious intentions. Especially when he felt that the other party didn't treat him as a human being, but as a devil. Even though he is not a normal human being at all. But looking at him from this kind of perspective, he is too zooey. Cough. Cough. Vice President, the President announced that an emergency meeting will be held immediately. Please come to the meeting room on time to attend the meeting in 10 minutes. Sigh. This place seems to be more depressing than the President's office. After the Doomian person put down the notice, he was about to go for a walk with oil on the soles of his feet. Clinker. Wait. Pariston stopped him with a smile on his face, squinted his eyes and asked, "Did the President say what the meeting was about?" An impromptu emergency meeting. Typical words or few words but big things. Policestone suddenly became interested. He had a hunch that the next answer from the Do-Mian man would be very interesting. Have. Play. The President said that this meeting is to discuss the feasibility of issuing the Hunter license in advance to Roy Zoldyck. Pariston. Roy Zoldyck? Issue Hunter license early? Pariston's eyes flickered, and he smiled and nodded at the Bean-Mian man. Tell the President, I understand. Hey, okay. Do-Mian ran out of the office in a hurry, and closed the door behind him before leaving. Squeak. The door closed. Behind the desk, the corners of Pariston's mouth floated up, and he murmured in a low voice, "Interesting." Chewing the 3 words, Zoldyck, in his mouth, he thought that there would be someone in the world's #1 killer family who could make Netero go against his own principles and make an exception to issue a Hunter license. And it is still in the Hunter testing stage, and my heart couldn't help but, patong, patong. I started to have a great interest in this Roy Zoldyck. Some people are born to be evil. There is no interest in living without being hated. Pariston Hill, Vice President of the Hunter Society, is one of those people. Obviously. There's a new toy coming out. The corners of Pariston's mouth were hooked into a deep verses in a place where no one could see, his eyes narrowed, and he murmured excitedly and even faintly trembling. The Vice President is boring. It's not as interesting as destroying toys. The smile has a faint tendency to develop in the direction of perversion. Doo-doo. A series of ringtones interrupted Pariston's thoughts. He took out his mobile phone and glanced at it, and the smiling face appeared without a trace feeling displeased. He picked up the phone and said directly, "Didn't I remind you not to call me in the association?" This is different. Pariston. There was a sharp monkey call on the other end of the phone. I just received a notification from the President. It is said that it is necessary to discuss the issuance of a Hunter license in advance. Hey, is it true? That guy named Roy Zoldyck must be from the Zoldyck family. I remember that he seems to be just a blind trash of the Zoldyck family. Why should the President set this precedent for him? This is too outrageous. I didn't say it. You must know something inside, right? Do you want to report to Lord Byongda? I always think this thing is too weird. Tweeting. You talk so much nonsense. Periston took the phone away in disgust, waited quietly until a monkey said he was tired, and then said lightly, some things. Wait until after the meeting to make a decision. Also. Periston pulled his face, and his smile was pulled into a strange shape, which looked very dangerous. Don't let me remind you a second time. I don't want to hear that person's name again in the association. Got it. A certain monkey scratched its head resentfully. Obviously, the left ear goes in more than the right ear, and Periston is used to this, and he didn't bother to say anything to him, so he snorted coldly. That's it. He hung up the phone directly. Then the handsome and wealthy young man walked to the window, poured himself a glass of red wine, took a sip, his star-like face was reflected in the goblet, filled with excitement and enchanted smile. It seems that it's time. Should some people go? In the president's office, Maha glanced sideways at the Netero boy who was still leisurely drinking lemon tea, and couldn't help but look at him calmly. It makes people want K to give him a meal. Hey, the real emperor is not in a hurry and the eunuch is in a hurry. Netero didn't pay attention to Maha at all, and slowly drank the last sip of lemon tea, turned around with his hands behind his back, and brought the bean-faced man who had just returned to his life, and said, let's go. As he said, without looking at Maha, he opened the door and disappeared from Maha's sight. President, is it appropriate not to take that one with you? The bean-faced man whispered to Netero. His cautious look was obviously played by Maha. After all, it was about his grandson, he was not present, and he always not feeling well. What's wrong? Netero walked slowly towards the conference room, curled his lips and said, who told you he wasn't there? This old thing has good ears. I knew you didn't have a few good words from me. Maha's faint voice came out. The bean-faced man screamed, ah, and hugged Netero's arm. Looking back again, there is no one behind me, I really saw a ghost. So. Although some people are not in the Zhonghu, the legend of him is spread everywhere in the Zhonghu. This is the reason. Netero touched Domian's bright forehead, signaling him not to be nervous. After a while, he came to the conference room and met the backbone of the Hunter Association, the world-famous 12 earthly branches. Zi, Chou, Yin, Mao, Chen, Si, Wu, Wei, Shen, Yu, Shu, Hai. 5 of them. Zishu concurrently serves as the vice president, Samsung Hunter, Periston. Shen Monkey, Bounty Hunter Shen Sayu Yu Rabbit, Ancient Document Hunter, Yu Piorn. Wu Ma, 2-star Trouble Hunter, Wu Sachu Kobayukawa. And the last one, who was the secretary of Netero at the time and also led the doctor, Samsung Difficult and Miscellaneous Diseases Hunter. Zugo. Shu Kiju or Yorkshire. Also known as Cheadle. Hello, President. Seeing Netero walking in, several earthly branches stood up one after another and greeted him. Even Periston, who had always been at odds with Netero on the surface, was no exception, and Wei Wei owed the body. Ho 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 ho. All sit down. Netero raised his hand and pressed down, walked slowly to the chair at the end of the conference table and sat down, casually glanced at the panda doll on the empty seat next to him. Cheadle, who is a secretary, brushed her hair that was hanging by her ears, and reported, Jin still didn't come. Porter White, Crook, Yinda, Myaston, Kong Zai went out on a mission. And Gai Lu. She is at the key point of dispensing the potion, and she really can't spare the time. It doesn't matter. Netero waved his hand, glanced at Kobayukawa, Pijorn, and Sayu, and finally stayed on Palestine for a moment and said with a smile, it's enough to have a few of you here. It's not a particularly big thing, and there is no need for all the staff to be present. President. Isn't it a big deal to issue the hunter license in advance? Sayu didn't stand upright, didn't sit upright, looked at Netero scratching his head, and couldn't help saying, this kind of thing since the establishment of the Hunter Association, it has never happened. It's hard to overstate. I agree with Master Sayu's statement. Pijorn looked at Netero with 2 long rabbit ears upright and 2 big eyes flickering. After hearing the news from Mr. Beanface Man, people were taken aback. Piorn exaggeratedly patted his chest, and said curiously, hey, President, who is that Roy Zoldyck who would make you willing to break your own principles for him? Listen to the surname, it's from the killer family. Wumasaki Kobayukawa is a man with a horse face and a pair of rabbit teeth. As one of the 12 earthly branches, he is in charge of criminal investigation. Master of Heart Talk, he took a deep look at Netero, and said in a deep voice, besides, the one named Roy can only remind me of one person. That good-for-nothing master of the Zoldyck family, Blind Roy Zoldyck. Blind man. Cheadle Piorn. A hint of astonishment appeared on his pretty face. The 2 looked at Netero in unison. The president knew that they were waiting for an explanation from him, so he said blankly, everything you said is correct, There is only one thing that is wrong. Netero stroked his beard, looked around the crowd meaningfully, and said, "People don't judge by their appearance, and rumors stop with the wise. Whether Roy Zoldyck is a legendary waste, you will know after a look." Beans. I'm. The bean-faced man came out from behind Netero with a grunt, raised the videotape in his hand. To meet Pariston, Sayu, Piorn, Sachu under the gaze of Kobayakawa and Cheadle, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stammered. "This is the video of Roy Zoldyck participating in this hunter test. I just copied it. Please have a look." As he said that, the Domian man kicked his short legs, hurried up and down, and played the video face to face. Paris Stone, Sayu, Piorn, Seitu Kobayakawa, and Cheadle looked at each other attentively. From Roy's first appearance, in the underground tunnel, he caught Kahlua as a horse to ride, which made Ilfans unhappy, but he was blown away by his fist. Then he slapped the powerful perverted magician Hisoka away. Finally, as soon as he set foot on the Shamail wetland, he unleashed a domineering move that stunned all the apes. Pariston, Sayu, Piorn, Sachu Kobayakawa, Cheadle. I was surprised to find that this blind man named Roy Zoldyck is not simple. At least in terms of strength, his magnanimity broke the limit and was enough to cross the threshold of newcomers. Competent for a one-star hunter. But if that's the level, I don't think it's necessary to grant him a hunter license in advance. Sayu said nonchalantly. And how powerful this blind man is. But breaking the limit once, it's a bit level. But if you want the chairman to make concessions, then it's not a good choice. It's not just the breaking the limit. Pariston stared at the scene where Roy released the domineering arrogance with great interest, and chuckled. His aura seems to be different from ours. It's the same, but there's an extra flavor. Sayu scratched his head. Seeing Wuma Sachu Kobayakawa, he added with a solemn expression, "It's majestic. The taste of Wangba. Master of Talking Heart is worthy of worrying hunter. He is quite keen on controlling emotions. I don't know if you noticed that Roy Zoldyck's blind eyes hide an aura of disdain for the world. It's as if I don't care about anything. I don't care about anything. I'm supercilious but weird. I've only seen this feeling when I was facing the princes of Kajin." The Prince of Kajin. The hearts of the few people sank suddenly. That is not a simple character. But even so, assuming that he is as talented as the former Jin, you can't skip the test and give him a hunter license directly, Sayu said unconvinced. Everyone has climbed up one step at a time. Even Jin is no exception. Why should he be given water? Besides, he is admitted now with an exception. In the future, if it is not good, he will be admitted again. Make an exception to absorb him into the 12 earthly branches. Then we will take a step up. If it doesn't work out, we will ride on their heads and shit. Who can bear it? President. At this time, Cheadle, who had been silent all this time, spoke. As Netero's secretary, she is undoubtedly a staunch supporter of Netero, but... Cheadle looked straight into Netero's eyes and said in a deep voice, "I think that although the other party's talent is good, he hasn't met the conditions to make an exception for him." Ho 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 ho, is that so? Netero smiled noncommittally. Let's put. Yes. The screen on the TV changed. The blind man stood upright in the sky, wiped his hair with his backhand, held a stick knife, and the scene of fighting 100 styles of Avalokitesvara came into view. Pariston, Sayu, Sachu Kobayakawa, Piorn, Cheadle. As if it had been rehearsed in advance, all eyes were stared straight, and people were dumbfounded. What the F***K did I see? How dare the blind man fight back and forth with the president? In the picture, Roy is holding a stick knife and slashing crazily. The 100-fold gravity knife hits Netero, and directly smashes the old man who is stepping on the moon steps into the ground. This is a scene that has not been seen since the establishment of the 12 earthly branches, or even earlier. Little Rabbit, Pidgeorn, who was also the host responsible for presiding over the election of the new president after Netero's death, was the most lively and active, and exclaimed on the spot. Shocked, he opened his mouth into an O type. Stuck one inwards, more than enough radishes. Cheadle adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose, and looked at Wuma Sachu Kobayakawa next to him, and he could see the unrest in the other's eyes. Ho ho. The old man at that time was really in a mess. Watching the video again, Netero recalled Roy's knife. Although he was careless, but the opponent was able to catch him by surprise. This kind of ability to seize opportunities should not be too much sleepy. What's more, not everyone can get close to the president's body. Pariston squinted at Roy in the picture, and his smile gradually became abnormal. If I read correctly, he should be it's a trait. That, Nianlong, looks like a transmuter. It is a emitter who can manipulate the think line to catch people in the air. While holding a knife, you can be tough with the president, and you can't even lose the wind. This is something that only an enhancer can do. In general, apart from the trait system, I can't think of a second possibility. Why did Pariston talk to that blind man? Sayu squinted his eyes and squinted at the handsome and rich young man. It is also the traitor that Mr. Byongda planted in the Hunter Association. We should pay attention, shouldn't the point be? Is the blind man from Netero? If Netero is to let him be included in the association ahead of time, the old man's power will undoubtedly increase a bit. This will undoubtedly add a little more difficulty to Mr. Byongda, who is committed to promoting the reform of the Hunter Association. So, bro, how can you turn your elbows out? It's a pity. He Pariston has never belonged to anyone. If you give him a forced definition, he prefers the name, spoiler. Whether it's Netero or Byongda. To destroy their plans, let them fight non-stop. At the same time, stand by and watch. Joy is the meaning of Zishu's life. The recording is not over yet. If you think this is the limit of that kid, then you are wrong. Netero stroked his beard, and took a panoramic view of the reactions of several people. The kid, supermodel, wanted to give him a group of subordinates who usually regarded themselves as earthly branches. A little shock. It might make some people calm down a little bit. And at this time, as time goes by, in the screen, the battle between Roy and Netero is getting more and more intense. When seeing Roy like a lunatic, one knife after another, forcing Netero to use Nen to sacrifice 100 styles of Avalokitesvara. The huge conference room felt as if someone had pressed the mute button, and the dead silence was too much. Pijorn and Cheadle covered their mouths and tried not to let out a scream. Sachu Kobayakawa held his breath, his eyes became more and more serious. Sayu, who didn't know what to do, lost his tired look, and almost jumped up in shock. Haoxuan was glanced at by Pariston with a smile, and then he realized his gaffe. A pair of monkeys, his eyes were gurgling and spinning, and he didn't know what kind of idea he was thinking. Puff. Immediately afterwards, Roy pierced the palm of 100 Styles Guanyin with a stick knife, and finally broke Netero's defense. Then, the sound of chairs being staggered and pushed away suddenly exploded in the conference room. Sayu, who had just been warned by Polystone, stood up abruptly, slapped the conference table with both hands, and said sharply, "This is impossible. That is the president. Human beings are the strongest." Even though Sayu is dissatisfied with the opponent's inaction in the Hunter department these years, it does not hinder his recognition and admiration for Netero. Not to mention that as a fighter, Netero is even more. He is the benchmark figure of the martial arts school. Such a person's defense is absolutely unacceptable to Sayu. Don't be nervous. Sachu Kobayakawa crossed his arms and glanced at Sayu, and said in a deep voice, "The president didn't take it seriously. Play a few tricks with that kid with a game attitude. It's just the chairman's usual leisure and entertainment." Leisure and entertainment? That's not good. Netero looked at Wu Ma with a half smile and said, "Sachu, the butcher isn't playing. What I can tell you is, that kid has great strength." "How big is it?" Netero touched his chin, glanced at everyone, and said quietly, "I guess, it's about the same as the old man, and he's in the peak state of breaking the limit of the first layer." Pjorn Cheadle. Sayu Kobayakawa. Sayu, Pariston. It seems to be stared at by Medusa, and the collective petrification is speechless. The strongest recognition from human beings is definitely not groundless, deceptive nonsense. Since the strength can reach the peak of breaking the limit. That is to say, Roy Zoldyck. Isn't he the same as me, a double limit breaker? Pjorn's two drooping rabbit ears suddenly stood up. Suddenly, a terrible fact came to my mind. Except for a few people here, it seems that there is no way to overwhelm the blind. It's not just you, I'm the same. Seitu Kobayakawa sighed silently, being compared to a rookie Xiaobai who hasn't got a hunter license. It's really shocking enough. And I. Sayu slumped down and sat down on the chair, although I really don't want to admit it. Hey, don't be depressed. Breaking the limit is not so easy. If you can break the limit twice at this age, you have already surpassed most people. Seeing that the meeting room was stained by a decadent atmosphere, Netero certainly took advantage of Roy's strength to kill the pride and arrogance of the association. But all of them became eggplants beaten by frost. Too much enough. However, when it came to age, Paliston folded his hands, held his chin, looked at Netero with a smile and said, "The president has a very close friendship with the Zoldyck family. You should know how old Roy Zoldyck is. 17. Netero's face became serious, and he looked around at the already numb Pjorn, Cheadle, Sachu Kobayakawa, Sayu. Finally, his eyes fixed on Polystone, and he said in a deep voice, "That's why I called this meeting to discuss the early issuance of the hunter license to Roy Zoldyck. There are many people who can achieve the double limit breaking in their lifetime. But the 17-year-old double-breaking person, the dragon and the phoenix among the people, the phoenix is rare. Worth making an exception for. So, let's talk about it. Whether you want to set this precedent or not depends on everyone's attitude. Netero took a sip of the freshly brewed lemon tea from Do Myeonren slowly. A gust of cool wind blew, and the conference room fell into a deathly silence. No one spoke for a long time. Sayu looked at Pariston. Bjorn and Cheadle also looked at Pariston. Sachu Kobayakawa thought it would be inappropriate if I didn't look at it. After all, the identity of the vice president is here. Give me some respect, so. I also looked at Pariston. The handsome and wealthy young man is always smiling. Even if he felt the eyes of everyone looking over, he was not moved. After pondering for a moment, he looked up at Netero and said, "Press logically speaking, such an outstanding talent should indeed be absorbed into the association. Judging by the talent that Roy Zoldyck has shown so far, I'm ashamed of myself." But. Paris's voice paused. Sayu glanced at him vaguely, heaved a sigh of relief, and leaned back on the chair. Sachu Kobayakawa, the old, heart-to-heart master, heard the sound and knew the meaning. I looked at Cheadle next to me, and I shut my mouth and didn't interrupt. There was only the lively and playful John. The little rabbit, seeing everyone was silent, her pricked rabbit ears drooped down, and she didn't speak. Just peeked at Netero. See you. The strongest human being raised his eyebrows, as if he realized something, and said without any surprise, "But you still think this precedent cannot be set, right?" The president clearly sees it. Pariston looked at Netero without fear, and said with a smile, "Principles cannot be broken, and this is why I have always admired you. Think about Jin. His talent is obvious to all. Since you didn't make an exception for him at that time, I don't think it's necessary now." The panda on the empty chair next to Netero stared at him with a pair of dark eyes, making Netero think of that kid who wears a hat all the year round, with the same vigor and rebelliousness. The result. As you can see, as a high pig in the 12 earthly branches, fishing for 3 days and drying the net for 2 days, absent from work all the year round, irresponsible. It has become a joke inside the association. So, in order to prevent Jin's situation from happening, I agree with the vice president's opinion. It's better to follow the steps and observe this kid more. Sayu picked up Pariston's words, and thought he had a good understanding with Pariston. It's a pity that the handsome and wealthy young man seems too lazy to play with monkeys. After speaking, he simply closed his eyes, and the old god sat in his seat to rest. What do you guys mean? Netero glanced at Sayu, Pariston, Kobayakawa, Bjorn and Yudo. Bjorn and Sachu Kobayakawa kept their heads down and did not speak. Neither support nor objection. Apparently they are bastards without backbone. Cheadle is left alone. Even if he supports Netero, it is useless. He can only make superficial efforts, vote for Netero, and save the face of the old man. In this way, 2 abstentions, 1 vote in favor, and 2 votes against. There is no need to vote, and the result, no. No one is allowed to make an exception to skip the hunter test and obtain a hunter license in advance. Even geniuses like Roy Zoldyck are no exception. It's a headache. Netero put the lemon tea on the conference table with a bang, raised his chin, looked down at Pariston, and said lightly, "The balance of the exam is due to. Because the existence of that kid has been broken. Pariston, since it didn't pass, I would trouble you to come up with a charter to solve the problem at hand. It's simple." Pariston glanced at Roy in the picture, a bright light flashed in the depths of his eyes, and smiled. Then just let the exam return to balance. So. I suggest that an additional earthly branch be sent over to focus on the strength of Roy Zoldyck. In this way, we can not only maintain the balance of the exam, but also be able to stand out from others, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This? You guys really treat the old man's grandson as easy to bully, don't you? Suddenly. A murderous aura so strong as to be condensed into substance suddenly poured into the conference room. Boom. The door of the meeting room was kicked open from the outside.